It was a cold morning in downtown Los Angeles. The city's usual buzz of traffic and people walking to their destinations seemed louder than ever. Elon Musk, known for his usual quick strides, walked briskly toward a coffee shop for his morning routine. His mind was preoccupied with business meetings and the constant flow of ideas for his latest ventures. But there was a moment when his focus shifted. His eyes locked on something that made his heart skip a beat. There, on the corner of 5th and Main, a woman sat hunched over, wrapped in tattered clothes. Her face was gaunt, worn by the streets, but something about her seemed eerily familiar. At first, he brushed it off as just another person down on their luck, someone he'd pass by as he always did. But then, as the wind blew her hair back, something clicked. It was her, Ms. Walters, his former high school teacher. Elon stopped dead in his tracks. He felt a cold shiver run down his spine. He blinked, not sure if he was seeing things. There was no way it could be her. This was the woman who had inspired him to push forward when all odds seemed against him. The woman who had believed in his potential when no one else did. And now she was homeless? A pit formed in his stomach as he slowly took a few steps forward. His heart raced, his thoughts swirling. How did this happen? Why was she here? And why hadn't he known? He stood frozen for a moment, just watching her. The woman, despite her disheveled appearance, had a strength about her. She looked up for a brief moment, meeting his gaze. For a second, their eyes locked, and Elon saw the recognition in her face too. Her eyes softened, and her lips trembled, but she quickly looked away. Ms. Walters? Elon finally managed to speak, his voice breaking through the cacophony of the street sounds. It was barely a whisper, but she heard him. She slowly raised her head, and there it was, the faintest flicker of acknowledgement in her eyes. Elon? Her voice was weak, almost unrecognizable. She looked at him with a strange mixture of surprise and something else. Guilt? Anger? Regret? Elon could hardly believe it. He had worked so hard to get to where he was now, and yet here she was, a woman who had once shaped his future, reduced to this. I didn't expect to see you here, Ms. Walters said, her voice shaking, not quite looking him in the eyes anymore. I guess it's hard to know where life will take us, huh? The sadness in her words hit Elon like a truck. It was as if the person who had been a guiding light for him, the one who taught him not just about science but about resilience and ambition, had been swallowed up by the world in a way he couldn't comprehend. He swallowed hard, a lump forming in his throat. His mind was racing, but no words came. Instead, he simply offered his hand, hoping she would take it. I can help, he stammered, finally finding his voice. You don't have to. But Ms. Walters quickly pulled her hand back, her face hardening as she recoiled. No, I don't need your pity, Elon. The words stung, but there was no venom in her voice, just a deep, raw sadness that seemed to have been buried for far too long. Elon stood still, stunned by her response. I'm not pitying you, Ms. Walters. I'm here to help. You taught me everything about persistence, about finding a way even when everything falls apart. Let me return the favor. She shook her head. You don't understand. I can't just accept help like that. She paused, her voice growing quieter, almost as if she were talking to herself. I'm not that person anymore. But Elon wasn't ready to walk away. Not without a fight. Please, he said softly, moving closer. Let me take you somewhere. You don't have to be out here like this. She looked up at him, her eyes filled with years of hardship, a silent story written across every wrinkle. You have no idea what I've been through, Elon, she muttered, her voice trailing off. Elon stood there for a long moment, unsure of what to do, how to approach the woman who had once been a beacon of hope to him. He could tell that she was struggling, not just with her circumstances, but with something deeper, something he couldn't quite put his finger on. But he wasn't giving up. Not this time. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? Elon couldn't stop thinking about that brief encounter with Ms. Walters. As he made his way to the coffee shop, her face stayed with him. Her hollow eyes, the pain, the resignation. It felt as though the world he knew had shifted on its axis, and he had no idea how to make sense of it. Sitting in the corner of the bustling cafe, sipping his coffee, Elon found himself lost in thought. He couldn't help but remember the first time he had met Ms. Walters. It had been back in high school, when he was an awkward teenager, more interested in computers than anything else. At that point in his life, he didn't really care for school, and he certainly didn't believe that he had much to offer the world. But Ms. Walters saw something in him that no one else did. She had been his science teacher in the 10th grade, and from the first day of class, she had treated him differently. While other teachers might have dismissed his quiet demeanor and daydreaming, she encouraged it. She'd asked him questions that challenged him to think differently, to dream bigger. She saw his potential before he even recognized it himself. "Why settle for small ideas when you can change the world, Elon?" she'd asked him once after class, her voice kind but firm. He remembered that moment clearly. Her words had stuck with him, even when he felt unsure about his future. Ms. Walters didn't just teach him about science. She taught him how to see beyond the surface, to ask questions no one else thought to ask. She pushed him, not because it was her job, but because she genuinely believed in his ability to do something great. That belief in him had been a lifeline during his darkest moments. When he first started developing ideas for what would eventually become PayPal, SpaceX, and Tesla, Ms. Walters' encouragement echoed in his mind. It had been her voice that told him to never back down, to keep going even when the world seemed to reject him. As the years went by, Elon had moved on. He had become the billionaire tech mogul everyone knew, constantly in the spotlight, surrounded by people who admired him for his success. But through it all, he never forgot Ms. Walters. He had tried to find her after high school, but she had disappeared from his life as mysteriously as she had entered it. He had assumed she was still teaching, still making a difference somewhere. He never imagined that life would take such a cruel turn for her. Sitting there, watching the steam rise from his coffee cup, Elon felt a pang of guilt. How had he missed it? How had he gotten so absorbed in his own world that he failed to notice someone who had once been so important to him, someone who had shaped his destiny, was now on the streets? The guilt was overwhelming, but it wasn't just that. It was the feeling of helplessness. He was a man who had reached the pinnacle of success, but here was someone who had helped him get there, and now he couldn't even offer her a simple solution to her problems. It wasn't just about money. It wasn't about a flashy house or buying her way out of her situation. It was deeper than that. She had been so important to him, but she wasn't the same person anymore. And maybe, just maybe, he wasn't the same person either. The more he thought about it, the more he realized something. If Ms. Walters had fallen this far, how many others had fallen too? How many people who had once inspired and led others had been forgotten by the system? He knew that the road to success wasn't always easy, but he never realized how brutal it could be for those who weren't fortunate enough to rise above it all. Elon sat back in his chair, the weight of it all sinking in. He had to do something. He had to help her. Not just because she had been a great teacher to him, but because she deserved more than the life she was living. Everyone deserved more. It wasn't going to be easy, and Elon knew that. He wasn't going to be able to fix her problems overnight, but he could try. He owed it to her. She had been there for him when he needed someone the most. Now, it was his turn to be there for her. For the next few days, Elon couldn't shake the image of Ms. Walters sitting on that street corner, her face drawn and tired. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw her. Her worn hands clutching a ragged coat, her eyes filled with a mixture of pain and pride. It haunted him, gnawing at his insides in a way he wasn't used to. He had seen poverty before. As a young man, he had spent time in South Africa, where he saw firsthand the struggles of those who lived with far less than he could ever imagine. And in his own country, he knew about homelessness, of course. Los Angeles had its share of people living on the streets, but seeing Ms. Walters in that position, it was different. This was personal. When he thought about his former teacher, all the memories of high school came flooding back. The way she challenged him, how she never let him take the easy route, how her unwavering faith in him had given him the confidence to dream big. In a sense, she had helped shape the person he was today. She was a foundational part of his past, someone who had opened doors for him when all he could see were walls. Now she was living on the other side of those walls, And the irony wasn't lost on him. Elon sat at his desk in his office, staring at his phone, the screen showing an article about a new Mars mission. But the words blurred as his mind wandered back to Ms. Walters. It was almost impossible to focus on anything else. She had been a guiding force, a mentor who had given him the tools to navigate a complex world. But now, it seemed that the world had turned its back on her. What had happened to her? Was she running from something? Was it just a matter of bad luck? He felt the confusion in his chest. How could someone so smart, so capable, end up like this? Was this how life worked? Did the people who lifted others up have to face the worst struggles themselves? Guilt gnawed at him. He had known about Ms. Walters for years. She'd been a significant part of his life, and yet, somehow, he hadn't thought to look for her. It was like she had disappeared without a trace after he graduated, and he hadn't put much effort into finding out what happened to her. He had his own ambitions, his own projects, and he was always moving forward, one step ahead. But now, standing still in his office, he realized that in chasing his own success, he had missed the most important thing: people. Elon ran a hand through his hair, letting out a frustrated breath. Was it too late to make things right? The thought of Ms. Walters out there, with nowhere to go, filled him with a sense of urgency. He had the resources, the power, the influence. So why couldn't he fix this? Why couldn't he help her in the same way she had helped him? There was a voice in his head telling him that he could, that he had the means to change her life. But there was another voice, one that told him to stay out of it. After all, she had turned him down when he offered help. She had refused his hand when he extended it. She didn't want pity, and maybe that was exactly what he was offering. Maybe she didn't need his charity. Maybe she just wanted to be left alone, to find her own way out of her struggles. Maybe she wanted to retain some semblance of control over her life. But that voice didn't sit right with him. He couldn't just leave it at that. It wasn't enough to forget about her. Not when he knew he could help. Elon had been faced with countless challenges in his life, but he had always found a way through grit, through innovation, through sheer willpower. And now, it seemed, the challenge was Ms. Walters. She had given him so much, and he couldn't let her slip through his fingers. But how? Elon knew he couldn't simply throw money at the problem, at least not in the way most people might expect. It wasn't just about finding her a place to stay or giving her a handout. He didn't believe that was the right solution. What she needed, what anyone in her position needed, was something deeper: support, encouragement, and perhaps most importantly, a sense of worth. It wasn't about fixing her overnight. It was about helping her find the strength to rebuild her life, piece by piece, without losing herself in the process. Elon decided to track her down again. He didn't care about the logistics or the risks. He had to try. He reached out to his network of contacts, hoping someone could provide more information about Ms. Walters, hoping someone knew where she had gone after all these years. It didn't take long before one of his assistants tracked her down. She was staying at a shelter on the outskirts of the city, a far cry from the woman who had once held a classroom full of young minds in rapt attention. The thought of her living in a shelter hit him hard. This was the woman who had taught him more than anyone else. And now, she was just another person in a system that couldn't seem to care. Elon felt an overwhelming need to do something, to act, to fix what had gone wrong, to make up for the years he had lost track of her. He couldn't let her stay there, not when he had the power to do something about it. That evening, he made a decision. He would go see her. No more waiting. No more indecision. He would find her, no matter what it took. He called his assistant and arranged for a meeting with Ms. Walters the next morning. As he hung up the phone, a sense of resolve settled over him. He wasn't sure what he could offer her, but he knew one thing for certain: he wasn't going to let her face this alone. The woman who had once helped him shape his future deserved a chance to reclaim hers. The next morning, Elon found himself standing in front of a modest building on the edge of Los Angeles, far from the sleek, high-tech offices and flashy vehicles that usually marked his daily life. The place looked like any other shelter in the city: simple, unassuming, and overcrowded. It wasn't what he expected, not when he thought about the woman who had once inspired him so deeply. As he stood there, staring up at the building, a mix of emotions washed over him: uncertainty, guilt, and determination. He wasn't sure what exactly he was walking into. He had no idea what Ms. Walters' life had been like since high school, what had led her down this path. Was she angry? Hurt? Was she ashamed of what had become of her? Would she even want to see him? But he couldn't turn back now. He had to see her. He owed it to her. Inside the shelter, the air was heavy with the sounds of people talking, clattering plates, and murmured conversations. The volunteers were moving quickly, trying to keep everything organized, as a few men and women sat in the common area, some watching TV, others reading. Elon walked through the entrance, feeling the weight of the situation pressing on him. He was used to being in control, used to solving problems with a strategy. But here, there was no roadmap, no clear direction. Everything felt unfamiliar. He asked one of the volunteers at the front desk about Ms. Walters, giving a description of her as best as he could. The volunteer nodded and led him down a narrow hallway, past more rooms and curtained-off areas where people were resting. Eventually, they arrived at a small room with a few worn-out chairs and a table. At the far end of the room, sitting by the window, was a woman with her back turned to him. Elon's heart skipped a beat. It was her. Ms. Walters looked different. The woman sitting there wasn't the same teacher he remembered. The one with the bright, enthusiastic eyes and the energy that filled a classroom. She had aged, of course, but it wasn't just that. There was a sadness in her posture, a resignation in the way she stared out the window, as if she were watching her life slip away. Elon stood there for a moment, unsure whether to speak. The last thing he wanted was to intrude, to make her feel uncomfortable, but he also knew that this was his chance, perhaps his only chance, to try to help. "Ms. Walters?" he said softly, his voice betraying the nerves he hadn't expected to feel. She didn't turn at first, and he felt a pang of doubt. But then, after a few seconds, she slowly turned her head, her eyes locking with his. For a brief moment, they just stared at each other, neither speaking. It felt like the air between them was thick with everything that had passed. Years of separation, regret, and lost opportunities. "Elon," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, as if she were testing the reality of his presence. "I didn't expect you to find me here." Her words felt like a punch in the stomach, and Elon had to swallow the lump in his throat before he could respond. "I didn't expect it either," he admitted, walking over to the chair beside her. "But I couldn't just let it be. I had to see you. You were important to me. And now I'm here." "What happened, Ms. Walters? How did you end up here?" She looked away, her gaze drifting back to the window, and for a moment, Elon wasn't sure she was going to answer. He sat quietly, watching her, waiting. Finally, she spoke again, her voice low and hesitant. "I've been asking myself the same thing," she said. "I didn't plan for it, Elon. I didn't think my life would turn out this way. It's a long story, and it's not something I'm proud of." Elon leaned forward, his voice softening. "You don't have to tell me everything, but I want to help. I know you've been through a lot, but you don't deserve this. No one deserves this." She shook her head slowly, her hands twisting nervously in her lap. "It's not that simple. You think you know how to fix things, but sometimes you can't fix what's broken. I've lost so much along the way. I had dreams, Elon. I thought I could make a difference. But somewhere along the line, I lost my way. I got caught in things I couldn't control. And now, here I am." Her words hung in the air, heavy with years of disappointment and self-doubt. Elon didn't know what to say at first. He wanted to offer her a solution, something concrete, something that would make all of this go away. But he knew it wasn't that simple. He couldn't just wave a magic wand and erase everything that had happened to her. "I don't think you're broken," he said finally. "I think you're just lost. But you're still here. You're still fighting. And that's something. You don't have to face this alone." Ms. Walters looked at him then, her eyes filled with a mix of gratitude and skepticism. "You don't understand. It's not just about help. It's about trust. And I've lost trust in the world. I've lost trust in people." Elon nodded, feeling the weight of her words. He knew that trust was fragile, especially when life had been as hard as it had been for her. But he couldn't give up. Not now. Not when she had meant so much to him. "Then let me earn it back," he said, his voice steady and resolute. "I'll be here. For as long as you need." No strings attached. No judgment. Just help. However I can. Ms. Walters didn't say anything at first. She simply looked at him, her face unreadable. But after a long pause, she finally spoke. Maybe we can start with that. We'll see. But I can't promise anything. Elon smiled faintly, feeling a sense of relief wash over him. It wasn't a guarantee, but it was a start. And in his experience, every great journey began with just one small step. The days that followed were an emotional roller coaster for both Elon and Ms. Walters. For Elon, it felt like an unexpected and humbling journey into a world he had never truly understood. The world outside his tech empire, where everything wasn't about rockets, billion-dollar investments, or cutting-edge innovations. It was about survival, trust, and in many ways, a return to the most basic human needs. After their first conversation, Elon kept his word. He didn't pressure her, didn't push for immediate answers or quick fixes. Instead, he just showed up every day, offering a quiet presence, a steady hand. He made sure she knew that he was there, not because he could solve her problems, but because she deserved to be seen, to be treated with dignity, and to have someone stand by her side for once. Ms. Walters, at first, had been hesitant, her walls firmly in place. She had been through so much, and her trust in people had eroded over the years. But slowly, she began to open up. She shared bits and pieces of her story. How she had once been an idealistic teacher, dedicated to her students, believing that if she could change just one life, then it would all be worth it. But somewhere along the way, the idealism had faded, replaced by hardship, illness, and a series of choices that had led her to this point. She had fallen out of touch with many people, even family, after a messy divorce. Her health had deteriorated, and with it, her ability to maintain the life she had built. And then, one thing after another, job losses, financial struggles, and finally, the loss of her home, had forced her to live on the streets. Elon couldn't help but feel the weight of her words. It wasn't just one event that had led to her current situation. It was a culmination of years of broken promises, shattered dreams, and a broken system that had failed her in countless ways. "I never expected it to end up like this," she confessed one day as they sat outside the shelter, watching the sun set. "I thought I had it all figured out. I thought teaching would be my life's work. But it's hard to hold on to those ideals when life keeps knocking you down." Elon nodded, feeling a deep sense of empathy for her. He had always been driven by a desire to push forward, to change the world, but hearing her story reminded him that sometimes life didn't just hand out second chances. Some people had to fight for them, harder than anyone could imagine. It was that realization that spurred Elon into action. He wasn't going to fix everything overnight. He knew that. But he could make a difference. He could help rebuild the life of the woman who had believed in him when no one else had. With that in mind, Elon took the next step. He arranged for Ms. Walters to see a doctor and get the medical treatment she needed. Her health had been one of the major factors that had kept her from getting back on her feet. She was dealing with chronic pain and fatigue that had made even the simplest tasks feel like monumental challenges. The doctor visits were the first small victory in what would prove to be a long, winding journey. But with each appointment, Ms. Walters seemed to regain a little bit of her old self. Her sharp mind, her wry sense of humor, the spark that had once defined her as a teacher. Slowly, she began to trust Elon again, and they started to talk more openly about her past, her regrets, and the small dreams she still held on to. One evening, as they sat at the small table in the shelter's community area, Ms. Walters looked at Elon and asked, "Why are you doing this? You've got so much going for you. Why bother with me?" Elon stared at her, feeling a mixture of frustration and sadness at her words. "Because you mattered," he replied simply. "You mattered to me. You helped me when I had nothing. When no one believed in me, you did. And if I can help you even a little, then that's what I'm going to do. I don't care how long it takes. I owe it to you." She looked at him for a long moment, her expression unreadable. For a second, Elon thought she might say something dismissive, but instead, she simply nodded, her lips curling into a small, bittersweet smile. "I didn't think anyone cared anymore," she said quietly, the words carrying the weight of years of loneliness and loss. "Thank you. I don't know how to explain it, but thank you. Elon smiled back, the sincerity in her words striking him deeply. It was a moment he wouldn't forget. One of those rare instances when a simple gesture of kindness could change everything. But it was just the beginning. There was so much more to do. Elon knew that the journey ahead would be difficult, and it wouldn't be a linear path. There would be setbacks. There would be times when Ms. Walters felt like giving up. There would be moments of doubt, frustration, and fear. But he was ready for that. He was committed to this, not just because of who she had been in his life, but because he saw a person worth saving, someone who deserved another chance, just like anyone else. And so, they continued, step by step, day by day. Each small victory felt like a monumental leap forward. A doctor's appointment kept, a meal shared, a conversation that reminded Ms. Walters of who she once was. Slowly, she began to regain a sense of control over her own life. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't easy. But they were moving forward, together. For Elon, the most significant part of this journey was realizing that the answers to life's biggest questions didn't always come in the form of rockets, billion-dollar deals, or technological breakthroughs. Sometimes, they came in the form of small moments, helping someone when they were at their lowest, standing by their side when no one else would. As the days turned into weeks, Elon's purpose became clearer. It wasn't just about building companies or changing the future. It was about helping people, one life at a time. And in the process, maybe, just maybe, he would find something he had been searching for all along. The understanding that success wasn't measured by what you built, but by the lives you touched. As the weeks went by, a subtle but important shift occurred between Elon and Ms. Walters. Their initial meetings, filled with awkward silences and tentative conversations, had given way to something deeper. They started to talk more openly, not just about the past but also about their hopes, their fears, and the strange journey they were now embarking on together. For Ms. Walters, this new phase was as much about rediscovering herself as it was about her relationship with Elon. She was still wary of the world, still scarred by the years of pain and disappointment, but slowly, she began to let down her guard, piece by piece. And with every layer she shed, Elon saw more of the person she had once been. The teacher who had cared deeply, the woman with a dry wit, and the individual who, despite everything, still believed that people were worth fighting for. The small victories kept coming. She began volunteering at the shelter, helping with organizing meals and teaching basic skills to some of the residents. She wasn't fully back to her old self, but it was a start. Elon noticed a spark in her eyes when she worked with others, a fire he hadn't seen in years. It was the same passion she had shown in the classroom, and seeing it return made him believe that maybe, just maybe, she could find her way back to something meaningful. One afternoon, as they sat together in a small cafe after another doctor's appointment, Elon asked her, "Have you thought about teaching again? Maybe not in a classroom, but something more flexible?" Ms. Walters looked at him, her brow furrowing slightly. She hadn't spoken much about teaching since their first conversation, and Elon wasn't sure if the idea would be welcomed or if it would remind her of everything she had lost. "I don't know," she said slowly, stirring her coffee absent-mindedly. "I thought I was done with that chapter. Teaching was everything to me. But after everything that happened, I don't know if I could ever go back to it." Elon watched her, sensing the conflict within her. He knew it wasn't about the act of teaching itself. It was about what it had come to represent for her. A life that had slipped away, a dream that felt unreachable. "I get it," he said, his voice gentle, "but you have so much to offer. You don't have to be in a classroom to teach. Maybe it's about finding a different way to do it, something that works for you." There was a long pause as Ms. Walters looked out the window, lost in thought. For the first time, Elon saw the possibility of something new in her eyes. It wasn't the same certainty and excitement she'd had when she first started teaching, but it was a flicker, a small hope that maybe, just maybe, there could be a new beginning for her. "I'll think about it," she said quietly. "Maybe I've been too focused on what I lost to see what I still have." That night, as Elon lay in bed, he found himself reflecting on their conversation. He had seen Ms. Walters' potential long before she had. She was a natural leader, someone who could inspire others in ways few people could. And he realized that helping her rediscover that spark wasn't just about offering her a job or a place to live. It was about helping her find her purpose again. The next day, he called one of his contacts at a local nonprofit organization that worked with at-risk youth. The organization offered mentorship programs and educational support, helping young people who had fallen through the cracks of the school system. He knew it wasn't the same as teaching in a traditional classroom, but it was a start, a way for Ms. Walters to begin using her skills without the pressure of a full-time teaching job. He told her about the organization over lunch that afternoon. At first, she seemed hesitant, unsure of how her experience could fit into something so different from the work she had done in the past. But when Elon spoke about the potential to mentor young people who had faced adversity, kids who had struggled, just like she had, it seemed to strike a chord with her. "That sounds interesting," she said, her voice tentative but filled with curiosity. "I'm not sure I'm ready to jump into something like that just yet, but maybe it's a step in the right direction." Elon smiled, knowing that this was exactly the kind of opportunity she needed to begin healing. One where she could give back, share her experiences, and help others without feeling like she was being forced into a mold she didn't fit into. Over the next few days, Elon worked with the nonprofit to set up an introductory meeting for Ms. Walters. They met with the program director, a woman named Sarah, who was immediately drawn to Ms. Walters' passion and experience. The conversation went well, and by the end of the meeting, Ms. Walters agreed to start volunteering with the mentorship program, helping to guide a small group of teenagers who were struggling to stay on track with their education. For Ms. Walters, this felt like a breakthrough. It wasn't teaching in the traditional sense, but it was close enough to remind her of the woman she had once been. The one who loved to teach, who loved to inspire, who believed in the power of education. And slowly, as she began working with the teens, her confidence began to rebuild. She saw how much they valued her input, how much they appreciated her wisdom and guidance. It wasn't just about fixing their problems. It was about showing them that someone cared, that someone believed in them even when they didn't believe in themselves. Elon continued to support her through every step of this new chapter, checking in regularly, making sure she had what she needed, and offering encouragement whenever she doubted herself. And every time he saw her smile, every time she talked about her students, he knew he was witnessing something incredible, a woman rediscovering her purpose, finding her place in the world again. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't easy, but it was progress. For Elon, it was a reminder that the most profound changes in life didn't always come from the most grandiose gestures or revolutionary ideas. Sometimes, they came from the quiet, steady work of rebuilding trust and helping someone believe in themselves again. And in that moment, he realized something important. The most meaningful breakthroughs weren't the ones that happened in a laboratory or a boardroom. They were the ones that happened in people's hearts. The months that followed saw Ms. Walters steadily finding her footing again. She had begun to immerse herself fully in the mentorship program, working with a group of teenagers who had experienced their own struggles with school and life. It wasn't just about teaching them lessons in math or history. It was about showing them that they had value, that their experiences didn't define them, and that there were people who truly cared about their futures. Elon watched this transformation closely. He had always been the one in control, always the innovator, the problem solver. But in supporting Ms. Walters, he was learning something he hadn't expected to discover. Sometimes, the most profound way to make an impact wasn't through grand gestures or cutting-edge technology. Sometimes, it was through quiet acts of kindness, through showing up when someone needed you most, and giving them the space to find their own way. But despite all the progress, there were moments when it felt like the road ahead would be too long. One rainy afternoon, Ms. Walters called Elon after her session with the teens. Her voice sounded defeated, something Elon had never heard from her before. He had seen her face countless challenges with strength and resolve, but something in her tone told him that she was struggling. "Elon," she said, her voice shaking, "I don't know if I can do this anymore. I'm trying. I really am. But some of these kids, they remind me so much of my younger self, and I don't know if I can help them. I feel like I'm not making a difference." Elon sat up straight in his chair, hearing the pain in her voice. It was clear she had reached a breaking point, one that could easily send her spiraling back into self-doubt. But this was a crucial moment, a moment where he needed to remind her just how far she had come, how much she had already given. Ms. Walters, he said, his voice firm but compassionate. You are making a difference. Every single day. These kids, they need someone who believes in them. And that's what you're giving them. You're giving them hope. You may not see it right now, but you're changing their lives, one conversation at a time. There was silence on the other end of the line, and for a moment, Elon thought she might hang up or tell him that he didn't understand. But then, her voice softened. Do you really think so? She asked, her tone quieter now, almost vulnerable. I know so, Elon replied without hesitation. You've already changed my life, Ms. Walters, and you're doing the same for these kids. Trust me, you're doing more than you think. There was a long pause before she spoke again, this time with a slight catch in her breath. I don't know if I can ever repay you for what you've done for me, Elon. I don't know where I would be right now without your help. Elon smiled, feeling a sense of warmth spread through him. You don't owe me anything, he said. You've done all the hard work. I'm just here to support you, to remind you that you still have so much to offer. You've always had it in you. You just needed someone to believe in you again. The conversation ended with a sense of calm, but Elon knew that Ms. Walters' battle wasn't over. It wasn't going to be a simple, linear path to recovery. There would be more setbacks, more moments of doubt. But the important thing was that she was fighting, and that she was no longer fighting alone. The next day, Ms. Walters came to their usual cafe to meet Elon, her face a little brighter than it had been the day before. She told him about a breakthrough moment she had had with one of the students, a young girl named Brianna, who had been particularly closed off and resistant to any form of mentorship. After weeks of struggling to connect with her, Ms. Walters had finally gotten through, not by offering advice or solutions, but simply by listening. I just let her talk, Ms. Walters said, her voice tinged with a newfound sense of accomplishment. I didn't try to fix everything. I just let her share what she was going through. And by the end of the session, I could see that something had shifted for her. She's still struggling, but at least now she knows she's not alone. Elon leaned back in his chair, a feeling of pride welling up in him. It wasn't a dramatic success, but it was real, and it was meaningful. It was the kind of impact that would last, even if it took years to fully reveal itself. That's huge, Elon said, his smile wide. You're making a difference, Ms. Walters. You've already changed Brianna's life. And that's just the beginning. Ms. Walters looked at him, her eyes glistening with gratitude. I don't know if I ever really understood what you meant when you said that I could help others. But now I think I'm starting to get it. Elon nodded, feeling like he was witnessing a small miracle. A woman who had once felt lost, now finding her way back to herself through the very thing that had once been her greatest passion. Teaching, guiding, and empowering others. For Elon, this moment felt like the culmination of something larger than just a personal project. It felt like the beginning of a greater purpose, one that extended beyond technology and business into something far more human. As the weeks turned into months, Elon and Ms. Walters worked together to expand the mentorship program. They added more students, more mentors, and even started organizing small workshops for local schools, focusing on resilience, self-worth, and overcoming obstacles. It wasn't just a second chance for Ms. Walters. It was a second chance for every life she touched. And as Elon watched her continue to grow, he realized that this journey wasn't just about helping Ms. Walters regain her sense of purpose. It was about the ripple effect that would continue to change lives long after their work together ended. Elon Musk had always been driven by the desire to change the world. But now, he realized that sometimes the most powerful changes didn't come from rockets or electric cars. They came from simple, human connections and the willingness to believe in someone when they had lost the ability to believe in themselves. As Ms. Walters' work in the mentorship program began to gain momentum, something unexpected happened. Her story started to inspire others. It wasn't just the teens she was mentoring who were moved by her resilience and commitment. It was the people around her, the ones who had seen her struggle, and those who had heard of her transformation through Elon's network of contacts. Elon had initially been focused on helping her get back on her feet, ensuring that she had the tools and the support to rebuild her life. But now, he saw the power of what she was doing. She wasn't just bouncing back from the hard times. She was becoming a beacon of hope for others. It was like a chain reaction. As she helped others rise, they, in turn, began helping others. The people who witnessed her journey, whether through the mentorship program or through her personal story, started to take action in their own lives. Elon had seen this kind of ripple effect in the business world before. When one breakthrough idea sparked innovation, it often led to even more unexpected changes, opening doors to new opportunities. But what he was witnessing now was different. It wasn't the innovation of technology that was driving these changes. It was the innovation of the human spirit. One evening, after a long day of meetings, Elon met Ms. Walters for coffee at their usual spot. She looked different. There was an energy about her that hadn't been there before. Her eyes were brighter, and her shoulders were more relaxed, as though the weight she had carried for so long had finally begun to lift. "Elon," she said, her voice tinged with excitement, "I had the most incredible conversation today. One of the students, Jamal, told me that because of the time we've been spending together, he started to think differently about his future. He wants to go back to school. He wants to pursue a career in engineering. He said that if I can come back from everything I've been through, then maybe he can too." Elon's heart swelled with pride as he listened to her. Jamal's words were more than just a testament to Ms. Walters' dedication. They were a reflection of the profound impact she was having on the world around her. It was proof that the effort she had put into mentoring these kids was paying off in ways that no one could have predicted. "See?" Elon said with a grin. "You're changing lives. You're doing more than just teaching. You're planting seeds, and they're growing into something real." Ms. Walters smiled, but there was a hint of disbelief in her expression. "I never imagined this. When I first started this journey, I just wanted to get my life back together. I didn't think I could have this kind of impact." But hearing Jamal say that, it made me realize how much potential there is in every single person we meet. How much hope there is, even when it feels like all is lost. Elon nodded, his own thoughts drifting to the larger picture. He had spent so much of his life focused on big projects, space exploration, electric cars, and artificial intelligence. But in this moment, as he sat across from Ms. Walters, he realized that the most significant impact he could make wasn't always in the form of a groundbreaking invention. Sometimes, it was about lifting someone up when they had fallen and giving them the tools to rise again. Their conversation shifted toward the future. Elon had been quietly working behind the scenes to help Ms. Walters expand her mentorship program. He had reached out to several community organizations, offering resources, funding, and connections to ensure that the program could grow and reach more people. He wasn't just supporting her now. He was building something that could outlast them both. "We need to make this bigger," Elon said, his voice full of conviction. "This isn't just about you anymore. It's about creating a network, one that can help people find their purpose, just like you found yours. We can't just stop at a few kids. We need to bring this to more communities." Ms. Walters looked at him, her eyes wide with a mixture of surprise and excitement. "You really think so? I mean, it's one thing to help a handful of kids, but to turn this into something bigger, I don't even know where to start." "Don't worry about the details," Elon replied with a smile. "I'll help with that. I've got a few ideas about how we can scale this up, reach more kids, and even involve local schools. We'll start small, but we'll build it over time. You've already done the hard part. You've shown that it works." As the weeks passed, Elon's support began to take shape. He introduced Ms. Walters to a team of specialists who worked on community outreach, event planning, and curriculum development. They brainstormed ways to make the program sustainable, with a focus on mentorship, education, and career development. Elon even helped with fundraising, using his own platform to draw attention to the cause. One of the most powerful changes that began to happen was the way the community began to rally around the mentorship program. It wasn't just about helping kids who were struggling. It was about giving everyone a chance to find their place, no matter their background. More volunteers signed up, more schools expressed interest in partnering with the program, and soon, the idea that had once seemed like a small, personal mission began to snowball into something much larger. For Ms. Walters, the progress was overwhelming at times. There were days when she felt like she was barely keeping up with the momentum, but there was always a reminder that kept her going. The faces of the kids she was helping, the ones who were starting to believe in themselves again, just as she had once believed in them. One evening, after another successful meeting with the team, Ms. Walters sat with Elon in the quiet of the cafe, both of them reflecting on how far they had come. "It's incredible," she said softly, looking out the window at the city lights. "I never would have imagined that I could be here, doing something like this, helping people in a way that feels meaningful. I thought I was just a teacher, but now I think I'm part of something much bigger." Elon smiled, knowing that this was only the beginning. "You've always been part of something bigger, Ms. Walters. You just didn't know it yet." And as they sat together, looking ahead at the future, they both understood that this journey wasn't just about fixing one life. It was about changing many. It was about the power of one person's willingness to reach out, to believe in others, and to help them realize their potential. It was about the ripple effect that started with a single act of kindness, but whose reach had no limits. Despite the overwhelming success of the mentorship program, not everything was smooth sailing. As Elon and Ms. Walters continued to push the initiative forward, they began to face new challenges that would test their resolve. The roadblocks didn't come from a lack of dedication or passion from those involved. Rather, they emerged from the practical and logistical hurdles of expanding such an ambitious project. One of the first and most immediate problems was securing consistent funding. Elon had provided the initial resources, but they both knew that for the program to grow, it would need a sustainable financial model. This wasn't something Elon had expected to be so difficult. After all, he had worked in industries where money flowed freely, whether in the tech world, the space industry, or the electric car business. But this was different. The mentorship program was a grassroots effort, and many of the larger funding sources didn't see the immediate return on investment. Elon had tried several avenues to bring in investors, from private donors to corporate sponsorships, but he had met resistance. Many people didn't understand why such a program mattered. They wanted to know about the ROI, about how their money would translate into something quantifiable. It was a hard sell when the value of the program wasn't measured in profits or shares, but in something far more intangible, the human impact. "It's frustrating," Elon admitted one evening as he and Ms. Walters sat in the same cafe, sipping on their drinks. "I thought this would be easier. People just don't get it. They're so focused on short-term gains. They don't see how powerful the ripple effect can be in something like this." Ms. Walters looked thoughtful for a moment before responding. "You know, I think that's the problem. People don't realize that when you invest in someone's future, you're not just changing that person's life. You're changing the lives of everyone they touch. It's like planting a tree. You don't see the full impact until years later." Elon nodded, appreciating the metaphor, but the reality was still hard to ignore. The funding problem wasn't just a small hiccup. It threatened to stall everything they had built so far. "We need a new approach," Elon said, leaning back in his chair, his mind whirling with ideas. "What if we find a way to show the impact in a more tangible way? Maybe we can build a system to track the success of the kids who've been through the program and show how it's affecting their futures." "That might work," Ms. Walters agreed. "But we also need to keep the focus on what we're doing right now. We can't lose sight of why we're doing this in the first place." It was a delicate balance, trying to scale the program while staying true to its roots. Elon knew they couldn't get bogged down by the frustration of fundraising, but it was hard not to feel the weight of the challenge. They had to find a way to keep the momentum going while also ensuring that the kids who were already benefiting from the program didn't fall through the cracks. As they brainstormed new solutions, another obstacle emerged: logistical issues with the schools and volunteers. While many schools were eager to get involved with the mentorship program, the process of integrating the program into their existing systems proved to be more complicated than anticipated. Some schools had strict guidelines and requirements for external programs, making it difficult to align the mentorship curriculum with their own. Volunteers, too, began to feel the strain. The program was growing rapidly, and while many people were eager to get involved, it became increasingly difficult to manage the sheer number of individuals. Some volunteers were struggling to balance their commitments to the program with their personal lives, and the growing demands started to create tension within the community. One evening, Elon and Ms. Walters were meeting with their core group of volunteers to discuss these issues. The room was filled with a palpable sense of uncertainty. The volunteers, who had once been full of enthusiasm, were now grappling with the realities of the program's expansion. "I don't think we're prepared for this level of growth," Sarah, one of the senior volunteers, said, her voice tinged with exhaustion. "I know we all want to make a difference, but we're burning out. We need more support, more structure." Ms. Walters glanced around the room, taking in the faces of the volunteers who had worked tirelessly for the program's success. She could see the weight of their concerns, and she understood it. She had been in their shoes, juggling too many things at once, trying to hold everything together while dealing with the pressure of expectations. "Elon," she said, turning to him, "maybe we should step back and reassess. We can't keep pushing without making sure we have the right support in place. We can't afford to lose the people who have been with us from the beginning." Elon sighed, running his hand through his hair. He had always been someone who thrived under pressure, someone who believed in charging forward, no matter the challenge. But he knew that this situation required a different approach. They needed a strong foundation, not just a desire to grow quickly. "You're right," Elon admitted. "We've been focused so much on expansion that we've forgotten to take care of the core of what we're doing. We need to make sure we have the right systems in place before we try to scale up." It was a humbling realization. Elon had always been a visionary, but in this moment, he understood that vision alone wasn't enough. For the mentorship program to truly succeed, they needed to ensure that every aspect of the operation, funding, logistics, volunteer support, and student involvement, was solidified before taking the next step. They decided to pause the growth and focus on stabilizing the program. Elon worked with his team to create a more structured framework for the volunteers, providing clearer guidelines and support systems. They also introduced new initiatives to provide ongoing training for mentors and volunteers, ensuring they felt equipped to handle the challenges that came with working with at-risk youth. In terms of funding, they decided to pivot. Rather than trying to rely solely on large donations from corporations or wealthy individuals, they began to focus on grassroots fundraising efforts. They started hosting local events, benefit dinners, charity auctions, and community outreach projects to build awareness and bring in smaller, but more sustainable sources of income. Elon also worked with Ms. Walters to launch a crowdfunding campaign, sharing their story and the impact the program had already had on students. Slowly but surely, the program began to find its footing again. It wasn't as fast-paced as before, but there was a sense of calm that came with it. They had refocused on the foundation, ensuring that everything was in place before pushing forward. As the weeks passed, they started to see the positive effects of their decisions. Volunteers were re-energized, funding was becoming more stable, and most importantly, the students were thriving. Jamal, the young man who had been inspired by Ms. Walters to pursue engineering, had applied to a summer STEM program. Brianna had begun to open up more, and her grades had improved. Other students, inspired by the one-on-one attention they received, started to believe in their potential in ways they hadn't before. For Elon, this was the true test of success. Not just growing the program, but ensuring that it could stand the test of time, that it could endure and continue to change lives. They had faced challenges, and there would be more ahead, but for the first time, Elon truly believed that they were building something that would last. The mentorship program was finally stabilizing, and Elon had started to see the fruits of his and Ms. Walters' hard work. Yet, even as things began to move forward with more clarity, a new and unexpected opportunity came knocking. It was something Elon hadn't anticipated, an offer from one of the largest educational technology companies in the world. One late afternoon, Elon received an email from a familiar name, Hannah Richards, the CEO of a company called InnovEdTech. Elon had met her a few years prior at a tech conference and remembered her as one of the most innovative leaders in the educational sector. She had spent years working on AI-driven learning platforms and had a deep commitment to improving education for underserved communities. Elon had always admired her work, but he had never expected their paths to cross in such a direct way. The subject line read, "Collaboration Opportunity, InnovEdTech and the Mentorship Program." Intrigued, Elon opened the message. "Dear Elon, I hope this message finds you well. I've been following the progress of the mentorship program that you and Ms. Walters have been running, and I'm deeply impressed by the impact you've had on the community. We believe that our technology could amplify the efforts you've already started, helping you reach even more students and mentors in a more sustainable way. At InnovEdTech, we specialize in creating scalable platforms that connect students, mentors, and educational resources. Our tools could provide you with the infrastructure you need to manage your growing program, track progress, and offer students access to online learning resources tailored to their needs. I'd love to discuss how we can collaborate to take your program to the next level. Best regards, Hannah Richards, CEO, InnovEdTech. Elon stared at the screen for a moment, a mixture of excitement and hesitation coursing through him. InnovEdTech had the kind of resources and expertise that could truly scale the program in ways he had only dreamed about. But there was a nagging concern in the back of his mind. He had seen so many well-meaning companies swoop in with their solutions, only to eventually take over and distort the original mission. Would this be the same? Would they truly help, or would their involvement compromise the program's integrity? He called Ms. Walters immediately. Ms. Walters, you won't believe who just reached out, Elon said, excitement creeping into his voice. It's Hannah Richards, the CEO of InnovEdTech. She wants to collaborate with us, help us expand the program with their tech. I'm not sure what to think about it. Ms. Walters paused on the other end of the line. InnovEdTech? She repeated, sounding thoughtful. I've heard of them. They're known for their cutting-edge tech and education. It could be a huge opportunity, Elon. But I understand your hesitation. We've worked hard to create something personal, something that doesn't rely on tech alone. I don't want to lose that connection with the kids we're helping. Elon nodded, understanding her concern. Exactly. I don't want to replace the human touch with technology, but maybe this could be a way to enhance what we're already doing. It could help us reach more people, track progress, and improve the mentorship experience. But we'd have to be really careful. After a long conversation, they both agreed to meet with Hannah Richards and her team to learn more about what the collaboration would entail. Elon was determined to hear them out, but also to ensure that any partnership would preserve the heart of the program. A week later, Elon and Ms. Walters flew to InnovEdTech's headquarters in Silicon Valley. The sleek glass building stood in stark contrast to the small, community-driven roots of their program. They were escorted into a large, minimalist conference room where Hannah Richards was waiting. She greeted them warmly, her demeanor professional yet approachable. Thank you for coming, Hannah said, extending her hand. I've heard so much about your work, and I'm genuinely excited about the potential of this partnership. We're all about amplifying educational impact through technology, but we also understand that the human connection is what drives real change. We want to make sure we're supporting that. Elon and Ms. Walters exchanged a glance before sitting down. Ms. Walters spoke first, her voice steady but cautious. We've built this program from the ground up, and it's been incredibly personal. We've seen firsthand how powerful the one-on-one connections between mentors and students can be. I'm just worried that technology could take away from that. Hannah nodded thoughtfully. I completely understand. Our goal isn't to replace those connections, but to support them. We've developed a platform that helps mentors track their students' progress, suggests resources based on individual needs, and gives both students and mentors the tools they need to stay connected, whether it's through virtual check-ins or personalized lesson plans. Elon leaned forward, intrigued. So, the tech would be a tool, not the core of the experience? Exactly, Hannah affirmed. The human connection remains at the center, but we believe we can provide the structure and resources to make it even stronger. We've seen how well this model works in other programs, improving engagement, helping mentors feel more supported, and giving students the resources they need to succeed. Elon turned to Ms. Walters, who had been listening intently. After a few moments, she spoke. I'm open to exploring this, but I want to make sure we're still building the program around the people. We can't let technology overshadow the relationships that are being built here. If we can do that, then maybe this could work. Hannah's eyes lit up. Absolutely. We're not looking to take control. We want to empower you to do even more of what you're already doing. And we'll work with you to make sure it stays aligned with your values. Elon thought for a moment, weighing the possibilities. The partnership could help take the mentorship program to new heights, but only if it was implemented thoughtfully. He had seen how technology could be a double-edged sword, but if used properly, it could be a force for good. We're in, Elon said finally, his voice steady, but we'll be very hands-on with this. We need to ensure that the technology supports our mission, not drives it. Hannah smiled, clearly relieved. Of course. We're excited to work with you both. Let's build something truly impactful together. Over the next few months, InnovEdTech worked closely with Elon and Ms. Walters to integrate their platform into the mentorship program. The system was designed to allow mentors to better track their students' growth and struggles, to provide personalized learning resources, and to facilitate easier communication between mentors and students. At first, the volunteers were hesitant. They worried about losing the personal touch they had cultivated with their mints. But as they began to see the benefits, more organized sessions, greater student engagement, and the ability to keep track of progress, they slowly embraced the technology. The new system also allowed the program to scale quickly. With better resources and infrastructure in place, more schools were eager to join the mentorship effort. Funding became easier to secure, as the data-driven results helped demonstrate the program's success. It wasn't long before the mentorship program had expanded beyond what Elon and Ms. Walters had ever dreamed. What started as a small initiative to help one woman reclaim her life had turned into a nationwide movement, with technology and human connection working in harmony to create lasting change. The mentorship program, now with the backing of InnovEdTech's platform, was beginning to take shape on a larger scale. Elon and Ms. Walters were seeing the fruits of their labor as more schools and students were joining the initiative, and the efficiency of the new system was proving to be invaluable. But with growth came new challenges. As the program expanded, so did the expectations, both from the community and from the volunteers who had helped build it. The initial excitement from the volunteers had been palpable. Many of them, like Sarah, the senior volunteer who had expressed concern about burnout, had believed in the mission from the start. They had invested their time and energy into the program because they felt they were part of something that could truly make a difference. But now, with the program growing faster than they had anticipated, they were starting to feel the strain. Elon had always been a visionary. He could see the possibilities and opportunities, and his drive to push forward had often been the fuel that kept the program moving. But even he recognized that if they were going to continue this momentum, they needed to address the well-being of those who were driving it forward. One morning, as Elon was reviewing some new reports on the program's reach, he received an email from Sarah. It was short and to the point, but the message hit home. Elon, I wanted to reach out to you directly because I'm worried about where this program is heading. I know we all agreed that we'd grow, but things are happening so quickly now, and it's becoming overwhelming. Many of us are feeling like we're just trying to keep up, and we're not sure how much longer we can give this level of effort without more support. I know you're all about progress, but I want to make sure we're not losing what made this program so special in the first place. Sarah. Elon felt a pang of concern as he read the email. Sarah had always been the steady hand in their group, someone who had been there through thick and thin. If she was feeling overwhelmed, he knew that others likely were too. It wasn't enough to simply scale the program. They needed to make sure it was sustainable. He called Ms. Walters immediately. Ms. Walters, I just got an email from Sarah, Elon said, the weight of it settling on his chest. She's worried about the direction we're heading. And honestly, I'm starting to see where she's coming from. The growth has been great, but I don't want to lose the heart of what we're doing. Ms. Walters paused on the other end of the line, her voice thoughtful. I've been feeling it too, Elon. We've expanded rapidly, but we haven't taken the time to ensure that our core team is supported. We can't let the volunteers burn out. They're the foundation of this whole thing. Elon knew she was right. He had been so focused on making the program a nationwide effort that he hadn't paid enough attention to the personal well-being of the people involved. But he also knew that making changes wasn't easy. Growth meant more responsibilities, and those responsibilities needed to be shared. We need to shift the focus, Elon said after a long pause. I've always believed in pushing forward, but now, I think we need to scale back for a moment, reassess, restructure, and make sure that we're supporting our team, our volunteers, and our mentors properly. Ms. Walters agreed. We can't keep running at full speed without making sure the people who are carrying the weight of this are equipped to handle it. Maybe it's time for us to bring in some new roles, people who can help manage different aspects of the program so that we're not stretching ourselves too thin. It wasn't long before Elon and Ms. Walters called a meeting with their core team of volunteers. The atmosphere was a little tense as they gathered around the table, unsure of what the future would hold. Elon could feel the weight of their concerns in the room. I know that we've been moving quickly, and I've been pushing hard to get this program to reach more and more students, Elon began, addressing the group. But I've also realized that we can't continue at this pace without ensuring we have the right support systems in place. We need to make sure everyone who's part of this, whether it's a mentor, volunteer, or staff member, feels supported, valued, and not overwhelmed by the growing demands. There was a collective sigh of relief in the room. It was clear that Elon's acknowledgement of the problem meant a lot to everyone. We're going to make some changes, Elon continued. We're going to bring in new team members to handle some of the logistical and administrative tasks. We'll also be rethinking how we approach volunteer roles, making sure they're manageable and sustainable. This program has always been about human connections, and that's something we can't afford to lose. Ms. Walters added, we'll be focusing on long-term sustainability. This isn't just about reaching more people. It's about ensuring that the people who are giving so much to this cause are also taken care of. As the meeting continued, the team discussed several new initiatives to help manage the program's expansion. They decided to hire additional staff who could take on the burden of administrative tasks, things like managing partnerships, coordinating with schools, and overseeing the growing network of volunteers. They also created a new tiered structure for volunteers, so that no one person would have to shoulder too much responsibility. But it wasn't just about the logistics. Elon and Ms. Walters also recognized the importance of maintaining the program's sense of community. To that end, they launched regular check-ins with the volunteers, offering them a chance to provide feedback and discuss any challenges they were facing. They also began organizing team-building events, creating opportunities for the mentors and volunteers to bond and recharge. In the weeks that followed, the changes began to take effect. The core team felt more supported, and the program's volunteers started to regain their sense of enthusiasm. They weren't just burning the candle at both ends anymore. They had the resources and support they needed to keep going. And as for the students, they continued to thrive. With the program's foundation now stronger than ever, the mentorship efforts began to resonate even more deeply. Brianna, Jamal, and the others were not just benefiting from one-on-one mentoring. They were part of something bigger, something that was being carefully nurtured to last. Elon and Ms. Walters knew that this was just the beginning. The growing pains they had faced were only natural, but they had come out the other side stronger, more unified, and more committed than ever to making a difference. The mentorship program had found its balance. As the mentorship program continued to evolve and expand, Elon and Ms. Walters found themselves faced with a new, unexpected challenge. The program had grown to such a scale that it was no longer just about creating connections between mentors and students. It was about finding new ways to make the experience meaningful for every individual involved. While the technology had provided valuable support, and the new infrastructure was allowing them to scale at an unprecedented rate, something was starting to become apparent. There was a growing disconnect between some of the more affluent students and those from less privileged backgrounds. The initial success of the program had been built on an assumption that the shared experience of mentorship would transcend social and economic divides. But now, Elon was beginning to see cracks in that ideal. He was reviewing some new feedback reports when he came across a few troubling comments. They were from mentors who had been working with students from wealthier areas, and it seemed that some of the students were simply going through the motions, with little genuine engagement. They had the tools, the resources, and the mentorship, but they didn't seem to truly care about the program or the people they were helping. On the other hand, the mentors working with students from underprivileged backgrounds were reporting breakthroughs, but they were also feeling overwhelmed by the intensity of the challenges their ments were facing. These students didn't just need guidance. They needed stability, emotional support, and resources that went far beyond what the program had originally envisioned. Elon called Ms. Walters as soon as he read through the reports. There was a tone of concern in his voice when he spoke. Ms. Walters, we've got a problem. I'm seeing some feedback from our more affluent students, and there's a clear disconnect. They're not fully engaged in the mentorship. And on the flip side, our students from disadvantaged backgrounds are facing even more complex struggles than we initially thought. It's like we're trying to solve one problem, but inadvertently creating another. Ms. Walters took a deep breath. I've been noticing the same thing. I think we might have underestimated the unique challenges each group of students faces. The affluent students have the resources. They don't need mentorship as much as we thought. But the students from underserved communities, they need a whole lot more than just someone to talk to. They need long-term support. Elon nodded. Exactly. The resources we've provided are valuable, but they don't address the deeper, systemic issues these students are dealing with. And while the more affluent students have access to everything they need, they're not invested in the program because it doesn't seem urgent to them. They both knew the program had been created with the intention of serving everyone equally, but now they realized that one-size-fits-all solutions didn't work in such a complex, diverse environment. After a long conversation, Elon and Ms. Walters decided that they needed to rethink the structure of the mentorship program. They couldn't just offer the same experience to every student. They needed to create tailored approaches that took into account the different needs of their diverse student body. The first step was to re-evaluate the mentorship model. While the mentorship connections were still critical, they realized that they needed to build in more holistic support for students in underprivileged areas. This meant collaborating with local community organizations, social workers, and even schools to create a more comprehensive support system. But they also needed to address the issue with the more affluent students. They needed to find a way to make the program more meaningful to them, to inspire a sense of purpose and empathy that went beyond the transactional nature of simply getting through the program. Elon knew they had to give these students a cause they could rally around, something bigger than themselves. Within days, Elon and Ms. Walters began to brainstorm new ideas. They decided to create a two-pronged mentorship system that would pair each mentor with a student in need, but also encourage mentors to get involved in community service and advocacy. They wanted the more privileged students to understand what it was like to live with fewer resources and to give them a reason to engage beyond just completing a program requirement. They also introduced a new initiative for the students in need, creating dedicated counselors who would work alongside the mentors to ensure that these students received the emotional, academic, and social support they desperately needed. This would involve working closely with their families, helping them access resources, and ensuring that they weren't just getting mentorship, they were getting a comprehensive safety net that would help them navigate through their challenges. It wasn't going to be easy. The changes were going to require significant shifts in how the program was structured, and the additional resources needed would stretch their already limited budget. But Elon and Ms. Walters were committed. They knew that if they truly wanted to create lasting change, they had to be willing to face the hard truths and make the necessary adjustments. As the program transitioned into its new model, Elon felt both excited and nervous. The stakes were higher than ever, and he couldn't help but feel the weight of responsibility. But he also knew that if they succeeded, they would be setting a new standard for mentorship programs, one that addressed not just the need for guidance, but the deeper, systemic issues that many students faced. As the program transitioned into its new model, Elon felt both excited and nervous. The stakes were higher than ever, and he couldn't help but feel the weight of responsibility. But he also knew that if they succeeded, they would be setting a new standard for mentorship programs, one that addressed not just the need for guidance, but the deeper, systemic issues that many students faced. Over the next few months, the changes began to take root. The affluent students, many of whom had initially felt disengaged, began to find new purpose in the program. By getting involved in community service projects, such as tutoring at-risk students, organizing charity events, and advocating for educational reform, they started to develop a deeper understanding of the challenges their mentor faced. They learned empathy in ways they hadn't anticipated, and many of them began to form more genuine connections with their mentors. Meanwhile, the students from underserved communities began to see the positive impact of the new resources being offered to them. With dedicated counselors and a more personalized approach to mentorship, they began to feel like they were truly supported, not just academically, but emotionally and socially. Their mentors became not just advisors, but partners in navigating the complexities of their lives. As Elon and Ms. Walters walked through the program's expansion over the following year, they couldn't help but feel a sense of accomplishment. They had overcome the growing pains, restructured their approach, and created something that could adapt to the needs of all the students involved. They knew there was still a long way to go, but they were more confident than ever that they were on the right path. The journey had been long and difficult, but with each new challenge, they were finding ways to rise above and make a real difference. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? It had been nearly 2 years since Elon and Ms. Walters had first started their mentorship program, and the growth they had witnessed was nothing short of astounding. From humble beginnings, the program had now expanded across the country, reaching thousands of students and mentors. Yet, despite the outward success, Elon couldn't shake the feeling that something crucial was still missing. The program had found its rhythm, but there was one last piece of the puzzle that had yet to fall into place. As they had transitioned into a more tailored mentorship approach, they had solved some of the most pressing issues, engaging both privileged and underserved students more meaningfully, and creating a support system that truly catered to each individual's needs. But Elon knew that scaling wasn't just about adding more layers of support. It was about making sure that those who were involved were truly invested in the long-term success of the program. It was about creating something that could not only stand the test of time, but that would inspire the next generation of changemakers. One evening, after another long day of reviewing reports and discussing the program's latest expansion, Elon sat down with Ms. Walters. They had been having more and more of these reflective conversations recently, trying to envision what the future of the program could look like. "We've built something incredible, Ms. Walters," Elon said, his voice filled with both pride and a hint of uncertainty. "But I keep wondering if we're doing enough to ensure that this doesn't just become a series of disconnected efforts. We've got the mentorship, we've got the technology, and we've got the support system. But are we truly equipping these students and mentors to change the world in a way that lasts?" Ms. Walters thought for a moment, her brow furrowed. "I've been thinking about that too, Elon. We've addressed the immediate needs, the support, the resources, the personal connections. But what about the bigger picture? What happens when these students leave the program and step into the real world? Do they have the tools to continue making an impact on their own?" Elon paused. She was right. While the program had undoubtedly changed the lives of countless individuals, it had been focused mostly on the present, the here and now. They had provided resources, guidance, and mentorship, but they hadn't fully equipped students with the skills and mindset needed to build on those experiences and take them beyond the program. It was time to make sure the program didn't just change lives in the short term, but that it prepared students to be lifelong advocates and leaders. "I think we need to think bigger," Elon said, his mind racing with ideas. "What if, instead of just providing mentorship and resources, we started creating a network of young leaders, people who are empowered to take on the challenges in their communities and beyond? What if this program became a launchpad for their futures? We could help them transition from being mints to mentors themselves, guiding the next generation and continuing the ripple effect of change." Ms. Walters nodded slowly. "I see where you're going with this. We need to shift the focus from just providing support to building a community of young people who can take what they've learned and apply it to the world around them. We need to create a system where mentorship becomes a two-way street, where these students become the leaders who inspire others." Elon's eyes lit up. This was the vision they had been searching for, the piece of the puzzle that had been missing. It wasn't just about mentorship anymore. It was about creating a movement, one that would extend beyond the boundaries of the program and inspire lasting change on a global scale. The next step was clear. They would create a new initiative within the program called Leaders for Tomorrow, a leadership development track that would identify students who had shown exceptional potential and guide them toward becoming the next generation of mentors, activists, and entrepreneurs. These students would be given the tools, education, and opportunities to not only succeed in their own lives, but to become the catalyst for change in their communities and the world. The Leaders for Tomorrow initiative would be a rigorous program, one that would equip students with the skills to lead effectively, everything from public speaking to social entrepreneurship to community organizing. Elon envisioned a global network of young people who were united by a common goal: to create a better future. But the most exciting part? This new initiative would be entirely student-driven. The students who graduated from the mentorship program would be invited to become part of this leadership track, where they would be given the resources to develop and execute their own projects. They could choose to work on issues that were personal to them, whether it was education reform, environmental sustainability, or tackling social inequality. The focus wasn't just on academic or professional success. It was on creating real, lasting change in the world. The program would provide students with the tools to take what they had learned through mentorship and turn it into action that could change lives. Over the next several months, Elon and Ms. Walters poured their hearts and souls into designing the Leaders for Tomorrow initiative. They reached out to experts in various fields, leaders in education, social justice, business, and technology, to help design a curriculum that would empower these future leaders. They also formed partnerships with nonprofit organizations, corporations, and government bodies to ensure that the students would have access to the resources they needed to turn their ideas into reality. By the time the first cohort of Leaders for Tomorrow students graduated from the mentorship program, Elon felt an overwhelming sense of pride. These students weren't just graduating. They were embarking on a new journey to make a tangible impact in the world. The initiative kicked off with a summit where all the students gathered to present their ideas. The energy in the room was palpable. They weren't just talking about theories or hypothetical problems. They were presenting actionable solutions, some of which had already started to take shape. It was clear that the program had not only prepared them to become leaders, it had helped them realize their potential to change the world. Among the first graduates was Jamal, who had once been the shy, uncertain student. Now, he stood at the front of the room, his voice strong and confident as he shared his vision for a community-driven tech startup aimed at providing affordable digital resources to underserved schools. Brianna, who had struggled with her academic performance in the early days of the program, spoke passionately about creating a mentorship initiative for young girls in her community, helping them find confidence and pursue careers in science and technology. Elon watched them with a sense of awe. This wasn't just the end of a program. It was the beginning of something much larger. These young people weren't just taking what they had learned and applying it. They were using it to build the kind of world they wanted to live in. And for Elon, there was no greater reward than knowing that the seeds of change had been planted, and that the next generation of leaders was ready to carry the torch. The excitement of the Leaders for Tomorrow initiative had ignited a fire in students across the country. As Elon stood in the conference room, reviewing the success stories from the first cohort, a deep sense of fulfillment washed over him. This was it, the culmination of years of hard work, sacrifice, and vision. He had created something that could outlast him, a program that would impact generations to come. Yet, as fulfilling as this moment was, Elon knew the journey wasn't over. In fact, it had only just begun. He and Ms. Walters had made great strides, but there was always more to do. Even though the program had grown far beyond what they'd imagined, Elon couldn't help but feel the pressure of maintaining the momentum. What if the next generation of leaders didn't meet their expectations? What if they couldn't scale the initiative globally as they had dreamed? It was these concerns that kept him awake late at night, pacing around his office, thinking about the future. He knew that if they were going to create real, lasting change, the mentorship program had to continue evolving. They had to push the boundaries even further, and that meant looking beyond what they had already accomplished. Ms. Walters was the first to recognize his unease. "Elon, you're doing it again," she said one afternoon, walking into his office. "You're thinking too far ahead. Look at what we've built already." The Leaders for Tomorrow initiative is exactly what we needed. You've laid the foundation for something that will last for decades. Elon exhaled, running a hand through his hair. "I know, but it's just not enough. We've created something amazing, but we're still just scratching the surface. How can we expand this? How can we reach more students, more communities? There's so much more to be done." Ms. Walters smiled, a knowing look in her eyes. "You always were the one to push boundaries, but you also need to give yourself credit for what's already been accomplished. This program is not just about growth in numbers. It's about creating meaningful impact." Elon nodded slowly. She was right. Sometimes, in his constant drive for more, he forgot to appreciate the magnitude of what they had achieved. But even in that moment of realization, he knew there were still gaps to be filled, challenges to be addressed. They needed to take the program global, to reach beyond the borders of the United States. They had already seen the positive impact in their own country, but what about the rest of the world? What about the students in underdeveloped regions who faced even greater obstacles than the ones they had been able to help? The answer was clear. They would take the next step. They would bring the program to countries that needed it the most. As Elon and Ms. Walters discussed the next phase of their vision, they turned their attention to international outreach. The logistics were daunting: different educational systems, varying cultural expectations, and diverse economic landscapes. But Elon was undeterred. The mentorship program had proven to be adaptable and scalable, and he believed it could transcend borders. "We can start small," Elon said, his mind already running through potential strategies. "We'll partner with global nonprofits and governments to build localized networks. The students in these countries need guidance, just like the ones here. And we'll give them the tools to become leaders in their own communities." Ms. Walters agreed. "It's going to be a challenge, but I believe we can make it work." The Leaders for Tomorrow initiative is more than just a program. It's a movement. And movements don't stay confined to one place. They spread. They inspire. With that resolve in mind, Elon and Ms. Walters began reaching out to international partners who could help facilitate the expansion. They found allies and organizations dedicated to education and youth empowerment, and within a few months, their network had begun to take shape. They started by piloting the program in several countries in Africa, Southeast Asia, and Latin America, regions that had a high need for educational support and empowerment. The results were staggering. Students from these regions who had once been left behind by traditional educational systems were now thriving under the mentorship program. Many of them had no access to the technology or resources that their American counterparts had, but they had the drive and the ambition to make a difference. With the right guidance, they flourished. In Kenya, a young girl named Amina began her mentorship journey. Her family lived in a small village where access to education was limited, especially for girls. Through the program, Amina connected with a mentor who helped her navigate the challenges of her education and encouraged her to pursue her dream of becoming a doctor. With the support she received, Amina not only excelled in her studies, but she also began organizing health clinics in her village, bringing medical care to people who had never had it before. In India, Raghav, a high school student from a rural town, had always dreamed of becoming an engineer, but his family's financial situation made that seem impossible. His mentor, a successful tech entrepreneur, worked with him to build a network of scholarships, internships, and opportunities. Today, Raghav is studying engineering at one of India's top universities and is already working on a project to bring affordable clean energy to his community. These stories weren't isolated incidents. They were happening across the globe. Students from different walks of life, with different challenges, were being empowered to change their futures. It was clear that the mentorship program was no longer just a national initiative. It had become a global force. As the program expanded, Elon and Ms. Walters were invited to speak at conferences and summits around the world. They shared their story with leaders in education, business, and government, and they received unprecedented support. Governments in several countries began to partner with the initiative, helping to fund local outreach and ensuring that the program could continue to grow. Through it all, Elon remained focused on one central goal: creating a lasting legacy of leadership, compassion, and change. He knew that the work they were doing today would have a ripple effect for generations. By giving young people the tools to succeed and the power to create change, they were shaping a new world. One where every student had the potential to be a leader, regardless of their background. As Elon looked out over the sea of students at the global summit they had organized, he felt a deep sense of pride. The mentorship program had grown beyond anything he had ever imagined, and he knew that its impact would echo across the world for decades to come. His legacy, he realized, wasn't just about building companies or making technological advancements. It was about empowering others, giving them the opportunity to become the changemakers of tomorrow. And with that, he knew he had accomplished something truly remarkable. With the global expansion of the mentorship program now in full swing, Elon was both exhilarated and exhausted. The scope of the program had grown so vast, and the impact on communities around the world was undeniable. Students in rural villages in Africa were now working with mentors in major cities, and teenagers in bustling urban centers in India were sharing ideas with young innovators in Silicon Valley. It was as if the entire world had been brought together by a shared purpose, a purpose to uplift, to empower, and to create real change. But Elon, for all the successes, felt a gnawing sense of doubt creeping in. It wasn't the growth itself that unsettled him. It was the realization that, with such rapid expansion, there would be new challenges that could potentially derail the program's success if not handled carefully. One morning, as he was going through the latest reports, he came across a troubling issue. Despite the overwhelming positive feedback and success stories from many countries, there were a few troubling signs. Some of the mentorship pairs were struggling to maintain engagement. In a few regions, cultural differences had led to misunderstandings between mentors and mints, and some students were feeling overwhelmed by the expectations placed upon them. Elon knew that any large-scale initiative would face difficulties along the way, but this was different. These weren't just logistical challenges, they were emotional and cultural challenges. If these issues weren't addressed, they could undermine everything they had worked for. He called Ms. Walters immediately. "We need to talk. I've been reviewing the latest feedback, and there's a pattern that's starting to emerge. We're seeing some regions where the mentorship isn't as effective as we hoped. Some students are dropping out or disengaging from their mentors. It's not that the program isn't working. It's that we need to rethink some of our approach. This isn't just about scaling. It's about cultural adaptability." Ms. Walters, who had always been his steady voice of reason, listened intently. "I've noticed some of that too. The cultural differences are more complicated than we anticipated. What worked in one country might not work in another. And let's not forget that many of our mentors are also struggling with how to connect with students who come from very different backgrounds." Elon rubbed his temples, a feeling of frustration rising within him. "We've done so much already, but if we don't find a way to make sure these students feel understood and supported in their own unique ways, all of this will crumble. I'm afraid we're losing the heart of what this program was supposed to be." Ms. Walters paused before responding. "You're right, but that doesn't mean we can't fix it. We just need to go back to the basics and rethink how we approach mentorship, especially in these new countries. We need to listen to the students and the mentors in each region. It's not about imposing our way. It's about working with them to create a system that reflects their needs." Elon nodded. "You're right. We've gotten too focused on the process and not enough on the people. Let's get some local leaders involved, too. We need to integrate community leaders into the program to help guide our mentors and ensure that the cultural nuances are respected. If we're going to do this right, we need to make sure that everyone, both students and mentors, feel like they're being heard." It was a pivotal moment. Elon realized that, in the race to expand, they had neglected the importance of understanding the unique needs of each culture and community. The vision of global impact was still valid, but it needed a more grounded approach. The next phase of the program would involve adapting to local needs, staying true to the mission of empowerment while also being sensitive to the local customs, traditions, and realities of each region. Over the next few months, Elon and Ms. Walters worked tirelessly to implement these changes. They organized town hall meetings in the regions that were facing the greatest challenges, bringing together mentors, students, and local community leaders to have open conversations about the issues they were facing. One of the most eye-opening experiences came from a mentorship pair in Nigeria. A young man named Chidi had been paired with a mentor from the US, but despite their best efforts, the relationship wasn't thriving. Chidi felt disconnected from his mentor, who was from a very different cultural background, and he wasn't comfortable opening up about the struggles he was facing, many of which were deeply tied to his family's financial difficulties. Through the town hall meeting, Elon was able to hear directly from Chidi's mentor, but more importantly, he heard from Chidi's community leader, who had been actively involved in helping the mentorship program get started in Nigeria. The community leader explained that Chidi needed more than just academic support. He needed to feel like his mentor understood his reality, his fears, and the pressures he was under. "Chidi isn't just a student," the community leader said. "He's carrying the weight of his family's hopes on his shoulders. He needs someone who can help him navigate these expectations, not just give him advice about school. The mentorship isn't just about academic success. It's about emotional resilience, too." Elon and Ms. Walters took this feedback to heart. They adjusted the program's focus, training mentors to be more attuned to the emotional and cultural needs of their ments. They integrated storytelling into the mentorship, encouraging students to share their own stories and challenges while helping them create a vision for the future that was grounded in their reality, not a foreign ideal. The impact of these changes was almost immediate. Chidi's mentor, once struggling to connect with him, began to shift her approach. Instead of just focusing on academic advice, she took the time to ask about Chidi's family, his community, and the challenges he faced outside of school. They started talking not only about how to achieve academic goals, but also about how to find inner strength and resilience in the face of hardship. Soon after, Chitty began to open up more. He started feeling empowered by his mentor's support, not just in terms of education, but in life. His grades improved, but more importantly, he found the courage to chase his dreams without feeling burdened by the weight of his family's expectations. The lessons learned in Nigeria were replicated across other regions where the program was struggling. In Southeast Asia, where students often faced intense pressure from their families to succeed, mentors were trained to help students manage expectations without diminishing their own aspirations. In Latin America, where students often dealt with political instability and economic struggles, mentors began working alongside local community organizations to offer holistic support, addressing everything from academic challenges to access to basic needs like food and housing. These changes didn't happen overnight, but gradually, the program began to flourish in new ways. The feedback from students became more positive, and engagement between mentors and men soared. The program's core message, that everyone, no matter their background, could achieve greatness, had finally begun to resonate in a way that was both global and deeply personal. In the end, Elon knew that the true measure of success wasn't how fast they grew or how many students they reached. It was in how they adapted, how they listened, and how they overcame the challenges that came with scaling something so ambitious. This was the test of resilience, not just for the students, but for the program itself. And with each challenge they faced, Elon became more certain that, together, they could weather any storm. As the global mentorship program continued to grow, Elon began to witness a shift in the way people viewed leadership. It wasn't just about traditional notions of success, power, wealth, or influence. Instead, leadership was becoming more about impact, about making a difference in the lives of others. The program had transformed the definition of what it meant to lead. The future of leadership was no longer just reserved for those at the top. It was for anyone who was willing to rise above their circumstances and pull others up with them. But there was one thing Elon hadn't anticipated: the wave of unexpected leaders that would emerge from the program. One of those leaders was Naomi, a young woman from a small town in rural Argentina. Naomi had always been a bright student, but her circumstances had held her back. She grew up in a family where financial struggles were constant, and many of her classmates had dropped out of school to help support their families. Despite the challenges, Naomi was determined to stay in school and pursue her dream of becoming a social entrepreneur. When she was paired with a mentor from New York City, Naomi initially felt out of place. Her mentor, Aiden, was a successful tech entrepreneur, and Naomi wasn't sure how their worlds could ever align. She struggled to see how Aiden could understand her challenges. How could someone from a place of privilege know what it was like to live paycheck to paycheck, to go without basic resources like electricity and clean water? At first, the relationship felt strained. Naomi was hesitant to open up about her personal struggles, unsure whether Aiden would truly understand or empathize. Aiden, for his part, was eager to help, but he found it difficult to connect with Naomi's experiences. There was a stark contrast between the reality she faced and the life he had lived. But it was during a late-night phone call that the catalyst for change came. Aiden had just returned from a business trip in Europe and was feeling particularly reflective. He called Naomi to check in, and she picked up the phone sounding more defeated than usual. "Naomi, what's going on?" Aiden asked gently. "I don't know if I can do this anymore," Naomi said, her voice shaky. "It feels like everything I'm working for is just not enough. I'm doing everything I can, but I'm stuck. I want to help my community, but how do I do that when I don't even know if I'll be able to keep my family afloat this month?" Aiden listened carefully, his mind racing. He realized that the divide between them wasn't just cultural, it was emotional. Naomi wasn't looking for business strategies or ideas to build a startup. She needed someone to understand her fear, her anxiety, and her exhaustion. "I get it," Aiden said, his voice calm. "I can't pretend to know exactly what you're going through, but I do know what it's like to feel like you're carrying the weight of the world on your shoulders. I can help you with your goals, but more than anything, I think what we need to focus on is your belief in yourself. You've been given everything you need to create change. You just need to tap into that." Naomi, unsure at first, allowed herself to be vulnerable. She opened up about her family's financial struggles, about the sense of isolation she often felt, and about her fear that she was simply destined to remain in a cycle of poverty. Aiden shared his own story, a story that wasn't glamorous or easy, but one that resonated deeply with Naomi. He had grown up in a working-class family, and though he had eventually found success, it hadn't been without tremendous sacrifice and failure. He explained that leadership, at its core, wasn't about having it all figured out. It was about using what you had, where you were, to make a difference. "You're already a leader, Naomi," Aiden said. "You're already stepping up every day. And that's the first step. You don't need to wait for everything to be perfect. You just need to start with what you've got and move forward." That phone call marked a turning point for Naomi. For the first time, she began to see her own potential. She understood that leadership didn't come from a place of perfection. It came from the willingness to fight, to learn, and to uplift others along the way. Aiden continued to mentor Naomi, but over time, the dynamic began to shift. Naomi began to take the lead in their conversations, coming up with ideas for how she could make an impact in her community. She launched a series of workshops for young women, teaching them practical skills like financial literacy, entrepreneurship, and how to use technology to drive change. She started small, but the results were immediate. The workshops grew, and soon Naomi had a small team of other young women working with her to expand the reach of the program. Naomi's work began to attract attention. Local governments and businesses took notice of her efforts, and she was invited to speak at community summits and conferences. She was no longer just a mentee. She had become a catalyst for change in her community. What had started as a mentorship relationship based on skepticism and disconnect had transformed into something far more powerful, a partnership that amplified Naomi's voice and vision. Elon had always believed that the greatest leaders were those who could inspire others to lead. And in Naomi, he saw the very embodiment of that principle. She had taken the lessons from her mentor, but she had also learned to trust her own instincts, her own abilities, and her own community. Naomi had become a leader in every sense of the word, someone who would continue to make a difference far beyond the scope of the mentorship program. As Elon reviewed the stories of other students like Naomi, he realized that this was the essence of the program. This was the legacy they were building. The true power of mentorship wasn't in what a mentor could give. It was in what a mentee could do with that guidance, how they could transform it and pass it on to others. It was about creating a ripple effect of empowerment, where each student became not just a product of the program, but a force within it. As Naomi's influence spread across Argentina, Elon felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude. This was why they had done all of this. It wasn't about him, or Ms. Walters, or even the program itself. It was about the students, people like Naomi, who were taking the lessons they had learned and using them to change the world. It was clear to Elon now, the mentorship program was more than a network. It was a movement. And in Naomi, he saw the beginning of a revolution. One led by young people who were ready to take charge of their futures and reshape the world. As the mentorship program continued to expand, the world began to take notice of the powerful changes taking place in communities across the globe. More and more stories like Naomi's were emerging, and with them, a deeper understanding of what it meant to truly lead. But even as the successes mounted, Elon found himself thinking more and more about a question that had haunted him for years. What was the secret to real change? What was the moment, the shift, that turned someone from an ordinary person into a game changer? He had always believed that success was a combination of vision, hard work, and the ability to push boundaries. But as he watched the leaders emerging from the program, leaders like Naomi, who had nothing but their passion and a few resources, he realized that the catalyst for change was something simpler, something far more powerful. It was the first step, the moment when someone, no matter their circumstances, decided to take action. When they decided that their dream, their mission, their vision was worth pursuing, no matter the obstacles in their way. It wasn't about the grand plans or the end goals. It was about having the courage to start. Elon had seen it over and over again. In students like Chidi in Nigeria, who had taken the first step by opening up to his mentor about his fears. In Raghav in India, who had reached out for help when he had no idea how he would afford college. In Amina in Kenya, who had begun organizing health clinics in her village without knowing where to begin or how to make it sustainable. They didn't have it all figured out, but they had taken that first step, and it had set them on a path that would change everything. But there was another part to this journey that Elon had not anticipated. The ripple effect? Every time one of these young leaders took that first step, they didn't just transform their own lives. They transformed the lives of everyone around them. Naomi's workshops in Argentina had spread to neighboring communities, with young women teaching their peers what they had learned. Amina's health clinics in Kenya had inspired a group of nurses to set up mobile clinics in remote villages, reaching people who had never had access to care. And Chidi's work in Nigeria had sparked a movement of young people who were starting businesses and non-profit organizations to uplift their communities. It wasn't just about one person succeeding. It was about the way each success became a foundation for more. This was the power of mentorship. This was the power of taking that first step, no matter how uncertain it felt. But even as he marveled at these success stories, Elon knew that there were still challenges ahead. The program had grown exponentially, and while many of the issues had been addressed, there were still obstacles to overcome. There were still parts of the world where the program hadn't reached. There were still students who hadn't yet found their mentor, who were struggling to find their own path. And there were still some students who, despite the support, had yet to take that first step. Elon began to think about how to solve that problem. How to get more students to make that leap, to find their courage and take action. It was one thing to create a network. It was another to create a movement of people who were inspired to move, to act, and to bring others along with them. It was then that Elon realized the answer. It wasn't enough to just match mentors with mints. They needed to create spaces, physical and virtual, where students could gather, share their stories, and inspire one another. They needed to see that they weren't alone, that there were others who had taken that first step, and that they too could do it. The idea was simple, but powerful. Mentorship wasn't just a one-on-one relationship. It was a community. A community of people who were all trying to make a difference, who could support one another, and who could fuel each other's growth. Elon took the idea to Ms. Walters, who was immediately on board. We need to create a global community, one that allows our students to connect not just with their mentors, but with each other, Elon said. They need to see that they're part of something bigger. They need to see that by taking that first step, they're joining a movement. Ms. Walters nodded. We've already seen how powerful these networks can be on a smaller scale. Imagine what we could do if we created a space where these leaders could come together, collaborate, and share their experiences. They set to work immediately, creating an online platform that would serve as a hub for students to share their journeys, ask for advice, and connect with like-minded peers. The platform would feature success stories, workshops, and resources, but most importantly, it would allow students to find their community, people who understood their challenges and who could cheer them on. The platform launched with great fanfare. Students from all corners of the world began signing up, sharing their stories, and interacting with others. The response was overwhelming. In just a few months, thousands of young leaders were coming together, supporting one another, and taking that first step toward changing their lives and their communities. Elon watched as the platform flourished. He could see the shift happening. It wasn't just about mentorship anymore. It was about creating a global network of people who believed in the power of that first step, who understood that real change didn't happen overnight. It happened when someone decided to take action, even if that action was small. For Naomi, the platform became a place where she could connect with other young women leaders, sharing the challenges she had faced and learning from their experiences. For Chidi, it was a space where he could collaborate with other aspiring entrepreneurs and find new ways to scale his nonprofit. For Amina, it became a resource for reaching even more villages, connecting with doctors and health professionals who were eager to help. Each one of them was living proof of the power of that first step. And as Elon watched the global community grow, he realized something profound. The mentorship program had become more than just a project. It had become a movement fueled by the courage to take the first step, no matter how daunting it seemed. For Elon, the real achievement wasn't in the number of students they had helped or the vastness of the program's reach. It was in the way the students had transformed, not just through mentorship, but through their own willingness to act. In the end, the program was no longer just about guiding the next generation of leaders. It was about igniting a fire in each of them, one that would keep burning long after the mentorship ended. It was about teaching them that leadership wasn't about waiting for the perfect moment. It was about taking the first step, even when you didn't know where it would lead. And that, Elon knew, was how real change happened. As the mentorship program continued to gain momentum, Elon had started to see patterns emerging, patterns that he hadn't anticipated. The students and mentors were evolving, but so was the program itself. What had begun as a simple initiative to help guide young minds had blossomed into a complex web of ideas, connections, and shared growth. One of the most unexpected developments, however, was the emergence of a new type of teacher, a mentor who, despite not holding the title of educator, had begun to influence others in profound and surprising ways. This teacher came in the form of someone Elon had least expected, an older man named Bill, who had been a mentor to a group of students in the United States. Bill had never been a professional educator or entrepreneur, but he had lived a life full of experiences that spanned decades. He had worked in multiple industries, from construction to hospitality, and had a wealth of stories to tell about perseverance, resilience, and the value of hard work. Bill's journey had not been easy. He had grown up in a working-class family, with little support or guidance, and had never gone to college. But Bill had always believed in the power of knowledge, specifically, the knowledge passed down through lived experience. He often told his mentor, "There are lessons that no textbook can teach, and those lessons come from living life fully, making mistakes, and learning from them." When Bill first joined the program, he wasn't sure what to expect. He had always considered himself more of a hands-on learner, someone who figured things out through trial and error rather than theory. He was apprehensive about whether he would be able to relate to the younger, tech-savvy students that were part of the mentorship initiative. But over time, Bill became a surprising fixture in the lives of his mentors. His wisdom, delivered in stories that seemed almost timeless, resonated with the students in a way that nothing else could. He taught them not through formal lessons, but through moments of reflection, encouragement, and often tough love. One of his mentors, a young man named Marco, had been struggling to find his path. Marco came from a family of lawyers, and despite his interest in art and design, he felt immense pressure to follow in his parents' footsteps. He had spent most of his life trying to meet the expectations of others, but every time he picked up a paintbrush or a pencil, he felt more and more disconnected from his true passions. Marco didn't know how to reconcile his desires with his family's expectations. It wasn't until a late-night conversation with Bill that things began to shift. "I've spent my whole life trying to please other people," Marco confessed to Bill, his voice full of frustration. "I don't know if I even like law, but I'm too afraid to let go of what my parents want for me. What if they're right?" Bill, who had seen countless people in his life struggle with similar dilemmas, simply nodded. "Son, listen. Life isn't about pleasing other people. You can't live your life based on someone else's dreams. The only person who has to live with your decisions is you. And I promise you, no matter how hard it seems right now, you're going to regret it if you don't give your passion a shot." Marco was silent for a moment, the weight of Bill's words settling in. "Bill, what if I fail?" Marco asked, almost in a whisper. Bill smiled gently. "Failure is only real if you stop trying. And trust me, the only true failure in life is the one where you never tried at all. Don't be afraid of falling down. It's getting back up that counts." The simplicity of Bill's message was profound. Marco didn't immediately act on his words, but over the next few weeks, the message stayed with him. Eventually, Marco decided to pursue his passion for design. It wasn't an easy decision, and he knew it would upset his family, but Bill's guidance gave him the strength to move forward. He began taking art classes and started building a portfolio. To his surprise, Marco discovered not only his talent for design, but also his ability to innovate and create in ways he never thought possible. It wasn't long before Marco began to gain recognition for his work. His designs were featured in local galleries, and he even received a few commissions for branding and advertising. The confidence he gained from following his passion opened doors he hadn't even known existed. Bill didn't push Marco into these decisions. Instead, he allowed him to come to them on his own, gently offering wisdom and encouragement when needed. It was through Bill's understated but powerful mentorship that Marco had learned not to fear failure, but to see it as an opportunity for growth. And in that, Bill had become an unexpected teacher, someone who had transformed the life of a young man simply by giving him permission to pursue what made him feel alive. This story, along with others like it, spread through the program like wildfire. Mentors who were not professionals in the traditional sense, Those who had lived unconventional lives, with lessons learned through trial, error, and sheer perseverance, had begun to influence their minds in ways that traditional academic backgrounds simply couldn't. As Elon sat with Ms. Walters one afternoon, reflecting on the program's journey, they both came to the same realization. This program isn't just about pairing students with successful entrepreneurs or CEOs, Elon said, his voice thoughtful. It's about understanding that success comes in many forms. It's about learning from the unorthodox, from the lived experiences that can't be found in textbooks. It's about understanding that sometimes the most powerful mentors aren't the ones with degrees or titles. They're the ones who know what it's like to struggle, to fail, and to keep going. Ms. Walters nodded. Bill's story is a perfect example of that. He's not your typical mentor, but he's having an incredible impact. There's something incredibly powerful about wisdom gained through experience, something that's hard to teach in any other way. It became clear to Elon and Ms. Walters that the program needed to celebrate this unconventional wisdom. They began to reach out to mentors who had lived through hardship, mentors who had learned from failure, mentors who had made mistakes but were willing to share their lessons with others. It wasn't just about guiding students toward success. It was about showing them that their own stories, no matter how messy or imperfect, had value. Bill became a symbol of the new kind of mentorship that the program sought to cultivate. He wasn't the only one, but he was a shining example of how sometimes the best teachers were those who had been through the most difficult of struggles and who had come out the other side with a deep understanding of the human experience. Elon realized that the true value of mentorship wasn't just in giving students the tools to succeed. It was in helping them discover the strength they already had within themselves. And for that, there was no better teacher than someone who had walked through fire and come out stronger on the other side. As the mentorship program evolved, Elon began to notice a recurring theme among the success stories of his students: personal growth. It wasn't just about gaining skills or achieving a career goal. It was about how each student developed as a person. What set these young leaders apart from others wasn't their technical knowledge or their accomplishments. It was their ability to stay true to their values, to persevere through hardship, and to hold on to their integrity even when faced with pressure. It was becoming clear to Elon that the true test of leadership wasn't how someone performed when things were easy. It was how they handled the challenges that came their way. Leadership, he realized, was ultimately about character. How would you act when the odds were against you? How would you respond to failure, to doubt, or to the temptation to take shortcuts for success? This test of character came to the forefront when one of the program's brightest stars, Maya, faced a decision that would test everything she had learned. Maya had grown up in a small town in the Midwest, a place where opportunities were few and far between. But from a young age, she had dreamed big. She had a deep passion for environmental sustainability, and her goal was to start a company that would create innovative solutions for clean energy in underdeveloped areas. Her vision was ambitious, but she was determined to make it a reality. When Maya was selected to join the mentorship program, she was paired with Jordan, an experienced entrepreneur who had built and sold a successful renewable energy company. Maya was inspired by Jordan's work and the impact he had made on the industry. Under his guidance, she began to develop her business plan, and soon enough, she was on the verge of launching her own clean energy startup. But just as things were beginning to take shape, Maya faced a dilemma that would challenge her beliefs. One of the potential investors who showed interest in her company was a wealthy venture capitalist named Harold. Harold had a reputation for being ruthless in his business dealings, often pressuring startups to take risks that could pay off big, but only if they were willing to compromise their values. He wanted to see returns quickly, and he wasn't shy about pushing companies to cut corners, exploit workers, or take shortcuts in order to maximize profits. Maya was initially excited at the prospect of having a powerful investor back her company. With his financial support, she could scale her operations faster than she had ever imagined. But the more she learned about Harold's business practices, the more uncomfortable she became. He had a history of prioritizing profits over people, and Maya knew that his involvement could mean compromising the very principles that had driven her to start the company in the first place. One evening, Maya called Jordan to ask for his advice. "Jordan, I've been offered funding from a really big investor, Harold. He's got the resources I need, but I'm not sure I can work with him. His values don't align with mine. He wants me to cut costs on labor and take some shortcuts that I'm not comfortable with. I know it would give me the money to grow, but it feels wrong." Jordan listened carefully, understanding the weight of the decision Maya faced. He had been in similar situations before, where the pressure to grow quickly had almost led him down a dangerous path. "I get it, Maya. You've worked so hard to build something that aligns with your values, and now you're being asked to sacrifice those values for success. It's a tough spot to be in, but you have to remember one thing. No amount of money or success is worth compromising who you are. If you lose your integrity now, you may be able to grow fast, but it won't feel like the success you dreamed of. Trust me on that." Maya sat in silence for a long time, grappling with Jordan's words. It was true. She had built this company with the intention of creating something that would help people, not harm them. The idea of cutting corners in the name of profit went against everything she believed in. But at the same time, she feared that turning down Harold's offer might jeopardize everything she had worked for. It was a classic test of character. Would Maya prioritize her long-term vision, or would she give in to the temptation of quick success and financial gain? After much deliberation, Maya made a decision. She reached out to Harold and politely declined his offer. She explained that while she appreciated his interest in her company, her vision was to create a business built on ethics and sustainability, and she couldn't compromise that for the sake of profit. Harold was not pleased. He tried to convince Maya that she was making a mistake, that she could still make money while doing things his way. But Maya remained firm. She thanked him for his time and ended the conversation. The decision wasn't easy. Maya had moments of doubt in the days that followed. Would her decision cost her the opportunity to grow? Would she regret turning down such a lucrative offer? But as time passed, Maya realized that she had made the right choice. Her values hadn't been compromised, and she felt a renewed sense of purpose in her work. Not long after, Maya received a more aligned offer from another investor, one who shared her commitment to sustainability and ethical business practices. This investor believed in her long-term vision and offered funding that would help her grow, without asking her to sacrifice her values. It was a slower path, but it was one that Maya felt proud to walk. In the months that followed, Maya's company grew steadily. She was able to expand her operations, bringing clean energy solutions to communities that had long been underserved. She hired workers from local communities and paid them fair wages, building a company that not only made a profit but also made a real difference in people's lives. Maya's success was a testament to the importance of integrity. She had chosen to take the harder road, the one that didn't promise immediate rewards but offered lasting fulfillment. And in doing so, she became a model for others in the program, showing that true leadership wasn't about sacrificing your values to get ahead. It was about sticking to your principles, even when the road was tough. Elon had always known that mentorship was about more than just providing the right resources and guidance. It was about helping students build the character necessary to lead in a way that was both successful and ethical. Maya's journey proved that this kind of leadership could, and would, change the world. She had passed the ultimate test of character, and in doing so, she had laid the foundation for a future that was built on values, not just profits. As Elon reflected on Maya's story, he felt a deep sense of pride in the program. It wasn't just about building businesses or launching startups. It was about building leaders who would leave a legacy of integrity and impact. The test of character had been passed, and Maya had shown that the future of leadership was in good hands. As the mentorship program grew in influence, Elon continued to see the undeniable impact it had on young leaders all over the world. He had witnessed firsthand how students who had once been uncertain of their paths were now creating movements, disrupting industries, and driving change in their communities. But with this success came a question that had been lingering in his mind. How could he scale this program in a way that not only helped individual students, but also created a ripple effect, something that could unite the global community? Elon had always been fascinated by the power of communities, how collective energy could move mountains, how shared vision could break down barriers, and how even the smallest of efforts could spark large-scale transformations. This wasn't just about building leaders. It was about building a movement, a network of individuals who weren't just empowered, but who were inspired to empower others. He thought about Naomi's work in Argentina, how she had started teaching young women in her community to believe in their worth, and how that belief had spread like wildfire. He thought about Raghav in India, who had not only started his own nonprofit, but had gotten other young entrepreneurs to join him in tackling some of the region's biggest problems. And he thought about Amina in Kenya, who had set up mobile health clinics that were now reaching even more rural areas. These students weren't just leading. They were inspiring those around them to take the first step to move forward in their own lives. They had turned their individual journeys into a community effort, and that, Elon realized, was the real magic. True change wasn't a top-down process. It wasn't about a few successful people pulling others up. It was about a network of people lifting each other. Elon decided it was time to put his theory to the test. He reached out to Ms. Walters with an ambitious idea: to create a global mentorship conference, an event that would bring together the students, mentors, and the wider community, allowing them to share their experiences, network, collaborate, and learn from one another. What if we create a place where all of these young leaders can come together, not just to meet their mentors, but to meet each other? Elon suggested during one of their brainstorming sessions. A place where they can learn from one another, collaborate on new ideas, and build partnerships that will extend far beyond the event itself. Ms. Walters was immediately on board. That's a game changer. The program has always been about creating connections, but this would amplify it. It would create a space for collective growth. The idea was to host a global conference where students could present their projects, receive feedback from their peers, and engage in roundtable discussions on the challenges they faced. There would be workshops led by industry leaders and mentors, and a special emphasis would be placed on networking. Elon envisioned an event where students weren't just listening to speeches, but actively participating, where they could build something larger than themselves, something that would transcend the confines of the conference hall. The first Global Mentorship Conference was announced, and the response was overwhelming. Students from across the globe signed up, eager to be part of a community that was bigger than any one individual. The anticipation was palpable as the event approached, and Elon and Ms. Walters worked tirelessly to make sure everything was in place. Finally, the day arrived. The conference took place in a massive auditorium, buzzing with excitement. As Elon stepped onto the stage to welcome everyone, he felt the energy of the room, a room filled with bright minds, eager to make a difference. It was an energy he hadn't felt before, an energy that came from the collective hope of all the students gathered there. "Welcome, everyone," Elon said, addressing the crowd. "What we have here is not just a group of individuals. What we have here is a community of people who believe in the power of mentorship, who believe that by helping one another, we can change the world. You're here because you've taken that first step, but the real work starts now. You are the ones who will drive change, not just for yourselves, but for the people around you. Today is about building the network that will carry that change forward." The applause was deafening. Elon could feel the excitement reverberating throughout the room. This wasn't just a conference, it was a movement. Throughout the day, the students presented their ideas, participated in discussions, and collaborated on new projects. There were stories of struggle, stories of perseverance, and stories of success. Each student brought their own unique perspective, but they were all united by the same belief: that mentorship and community were the keys to unlocking the potential within. One of the most powerful moments came during a session where students from different regions of the world were asked to share their biggest challenges. Raghav from India spoke about the difficulty of securing funding for his nonprofit, which was helping rural communities access clean water. Naomi from Argentina shared her experiences working with women in her community to empower them economically. Amina from Kenya discussed the challenges of scaling her health clinics, while Chidi from Nigeria spoke about the barriers he faced as an entrepreneur in a developing economy. As they spoke, the other students listened intently, asking questions, offering support, and brainstorming ideas. By the end of the session, there was a tangible sense of camaraderie in the air. They weren't just individuals with their own dreams. They were part of something much larger. They were part of a global community of leaders. Elon watched all of this unfold, feeling a deep sense of pride. He had seen firsthand how mentorship could change lives. But here, in this room, he was witnessing something even more profound: the creation of a global network of leaders who were committed not only to their own success, but to the success of those around them. This was the power of community. The conference ended with a call to action. Elon encouraged the students to take everything they had learned, everything they had experienced, and use it to build something lasting. He asked them to think about how they could continue to support each other, even after the conference was over. "The work doesn't end today," he said. "It begins here, with all of you. Stay connected. Keep collaborating. And remember, by helping one another, we can achieve more than we ever could alone." As the students left the conference, their minds buzzing with ideas, collaborations, and newfound inspiration, Elon couldn't help but feel that the true success of the program was not in the individual stories, but in the collective power of the community that had been forged. The mentorship program had always been about creating change, but now it was about creating a movement, one that would continue to grow, driven by the strength of the community and the belief that together they could do anything. Elon realized that the future wasn't about any one person leading the way. It was about all of them, working together, lifting each other up, and changing the world one step at a time. And that, he knew, was the true power of mentorship. As the Global Mentorship Conference drew to a close, Elon found himself reflecting on everything that had happened over the past year. He had seen young leaders from every corner of the globe rise to meet challenges, create meaningful connections, and inspire others in ways that had once seemed impossible. The initial goal of the program had been to create a network of empowered individuals, but what had emerged was something much larger, a movement that transcended borders, industries, and backgrounds. Elon knew that the next step for the program would be critical. The foundation was set, but it was time to scale it, to turn the momentum into something sustainable. He realized that he couldn't do this alone, and the power of the community that had formed around the mentorship program would be the driving force behind its future growth. After the conference, Elon had a meeting scheduled with Ms. Walters. They both had a vision for what could come next, but it was time to turn those ideas into actionable plans. As Elon walked into the room, he could feel the weight of the conversation ahead. "Ms. Walters, I've been thinking a lot about what's next for this program," Elon began, taking a seat across from her. "We've created something incredible, but how do we make sure it continues to grow and evolve? How do we expand this network in a way that's meaningful?" Ms. Walters smiled, her eyes filled with understanding. "I've been thinking the same thing, Elon. The community we've built is powerful, but it needs structure. We can't just leave it to chance. We need to ensure that we're not only supporting the students, but that we're fostering an environment where mentorship can thrive long-term." Elon nodded, agreeing. "Exactly. The world is changing faster than ever, and we need to stay ahead of the curve. I think it's time to start thinking about how we can take this program beyond mentorship and into something more, something that's a true catalyst for global change." They began brainstorming in earnest. The possibilities were endless, but they kept returning to one central idea: creating a platform that could connect these young leaders in a way that went beyond individual mentorship, a place where they could collaborate on projects, share resources, and work together on a global scale. It would be an ecosystem, a hub for innovation, knowledge sharing, and community-driven change. After weeks of discussion, the idea of a mentorship-driven startup incubator took shape. The goal was to give students not just guidance, but the tools they needed to launch their own ventures, enterprises that could solve real-world problems in industries ranging from renewable energy to healthcare to education. The incubator would be a space where students could find co-founders, get funding from impact investors, and receive mentorship from some of the world's most successful entrepreneurs, scientists, and social leaders. The mentorship program would evolve from a one-on-one relationship into a global, interconnected network of innovators who would be able to access resources, collaborate on solutions, and push each other to create positive change. To bring this vision to life, Elon turned to a small team of trusted advisors and investors who shared his passion for social impact. The goal was to provide not only financial backing but also operational support, giving students the opportunity to bring their ideas to market quickly and effectively. It was a daring venture, one that Elon believed could unlock a new wave of innovation from the next generation of leaders. As they began to make plans for the incubator, Elon thought back to the stories he had heard over the past year. The stories of students who had come from nothing, who had struggled against the odds, but who had risen to build something powerful. These were the people who were going to change the world, and it was time to give them the tools to do it. He thought about Maya, who had turned down lucrative offers in favor of building a company that aligned with her values. He thought about Raghav, whose nonprofit had already started to make waves in India. He thought about Naomi, whose community empowerment efforts were spreading across South America. These students weren't just innovators. They were community leaders, and they needed a platform where their voices could be heard, where their projects could be supported, and where they could learn from each other. Elon was more convinced than ever that the future wasn't about the individual. It was about creating a world where people collaborated on a global scale, where every person had the tools they needed to turn their ideas into reality. It was about creating a community of leaders who weren't just interested in their own success, but in the success of everyone around them. The incubator wasn't just an idea anymore. It was a movement, one that was about to go global. In the weeks that followed, the program's leadership team worked tirelessly to make the incubator a reality. Partnerships were formed, investors were secured, and students were handpicked to join the first cohort. The applications came flooding in, and it was clear that the demand for this kind of mentorship-driven innovation was massive. Finally, the day arrived when the first cohort of students was announced. Elon stood before a crowd of eager participants, excited to introduce them to the incubator that would change their lives and the world. "We are not just here to create startups," Elon said, his voice filled with conviction. "We are here to create solutions to problems that are bigger than us. We are here to build a network of people who will come together to solve global challenges. This is more than just business. This is about changing the world." The room erupted into applause, and Elon felt the electricity in the air. The incubator wasn't just a place for students to grow. It was a place where the future was being forged. This was the beginning of something bigger than all of them. As the first cohort got to work, building their companies, collaborating on projects, and learning from one another, Elon realized that this program, this community, had become more than he had ever dreamed. It was no longer just about mentorship. It was about creating a global ecosystem of change, where students were empowered not just to succeed, but to make the world better. And that, Elon knew, was just the beginning. The horizon was wide open, and the possibilities were limitless. The first cohort of the mentorship-driven startup incubator was well underway, and the energy in the air was palpable. Elon watched from the sidelines, filled with a sense of pride and awe as these young leaders poured their passion and determination into their projects. It wasn't just the ideas that excited him. It was the way the students interacted with one another, the way they supported each other and worked together, even when they were tackling their own individual ventures. The incubator wasn't just a space for business creation. It had become a living testament to the power of collaboration, to the belief that true innovation happens when people unite around shared goals, values, and passions. This was a community, and it was changing the game. One day, as Elon sat in a meeting with his leadership team, he couldn't help but reflect on the long journey that had brought him here. From the first time he had been struck by the power of mentorship, to the development of the program, to the launch of the incubator, every step had felt like a leap of faith. But now, looking around at the hundreds of students, mentors, and partners who had come together, he knew without a doubt that this was the beginning of something extraordinary. "Look at what we've built," Elon said, looking around the room at his team. "This is bigger than any one person. It's bigger than anything I ever imagined. We've created a platform where young leaders can not only learn but lead. They can't do it alone. They need each other, and now they have that support. They're not just building businesses. They're building communities." Ms. Walters, who had become a trusted advisor and collaborator, smiled and nodded. "Exactly. The incubator is just the start. What we're doing here is creating a blueprint for the future of leadership. This is about more than startups. It's about creating a world where young people can have the tools, the community, and the mentorship they need to turn their ideas into action. And it's all happening right here." As the months passed, the impact of the incubator became undeniable. Students from different parts of the world were coming together to work on challenges that transcended their own borders. They were tackling issues of climate change, healthcare access, education inequality, and economic empowerment, issues that had plagued the world for generations. And they were doing it together, with the support of mentors who were not just guiding them but empowering them to take bold risks and chase ambitious dreams. Maya's company, which had started as a small idea about sustainable energy in underserved communities, was now expanding into new countries, providing renewable energy solutions to even more rural regions. Raghav's nonprofit, focused on providing clean water to remote villages in India, had received a major partnership with a global organization that allowed him to scale his operations. Naomi had launched a global platform for women's entrepreneurship, and Amina's mobile health clinics had grown into a network of healthcare providers serving some of the most remote and impoverished areas of Africa. And these were just the beginning. Hundreds of other startups were launched from the incubator, each one a reflection of the students' passion, their commitment to their communities, and their willingness to challenge the status quo. The incubator had become a hub of innovation and change. But Elon knew that this was just a snapshot of what was to come. The true measure of success wouldn't be how many startups were created or how many products were launched. It would be in the long-term impact these leaders would have on the world. It would be in the way they continued to lift each other up, the way they created new opportunities for others, and the way they built a legacy of collaboration, integrity, and impact. One day, during a visit to the incubator, Elon sat down with one of the new students, Emma, a young entrepreneur from South Africa who had just joined the program. Her startup, focused on using AI to improve access to education in rural schools, was still in its early stages, but Elon was impressed by her drive. "I've always believed that mentorship is the key to unlocking potential," Elon said, leaning in. "But seeing you and your peers work together like this, it's something else. You're not just relying on your mentors. You're learning from each other. You're building something that's truly global." Emma smiled, a spark in her eyes. "It's all about community, right? I know I couldn't do this alone, but with all of you here, with everyone supporting one another, it feels like anything is possible." Elon nodded. This was exactly the shift he had hoped for. The transformation of mentorship into something deeper, something more lasting. It wasn't about having a single mentor guiding you to success. It was about being part of a community where everyone was both a teacher and a student, where everyone contributed to each other's growth. As Emma spoke, Elon realized that this was the moment he had been working toward. The mentorship program had evolved into a global ecosystem, one that was sustainable, collaborative, and self-perpetuating. The students were no longer just participants. They were leaders in their own right, shaping the future with their ideas, their passion, and their ability to work together. The impact of this community would continue to grow, not just through the incubator, but in the way these leaders would continue to mentor others, passing on the knowledge, skills, and values that had been shared with them. It was a ripple effect that would spread far beyond the walls of the program, reaching the farthest corners of the globe, igniting new movements, and changing the world in ways that Elon could never have predicted. Elon looked around at the bustling incubator, at the vibrant community that had formed, and he knew that the legacy of this program wasn't just about creating successful businesses or making a profit. It was about creating a generation of leaders who would continue to build, uplift, and inspire long after they had graduated from the program. A generation that understood that true success wasn't measured by wealth or power, but by the positive impact you had on others. In that moment, Elon knew that the work he had started with a simple idea of mentorship had become something far more profound. It had become a legacy. And it was just the beginning. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough?